everybody's ready, I call the Planning, Environment, and Development Committee meeting of January 9th to order. Got roll call. Jim Kearns. Here. John Reinert. Here. Carolyn Campbell. Here. Carl Comiskey. Here. Joe Bademeyer. Here. And I'm Larry Smith, and I'm here. So we're missing Lou Nessel this morning so far. We'll move on to public comment.
No, you gotta do minutes first.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Approve the minutes of November 1st.
Got a motion to approve the minutes of November 1st. Do we have a second? Seconded by Carl. Any discussion regarding the minutes?
I was just going to say there was one correction, it's really minor.
Okay.
It's regarding the environmental offenders. I forgot what paragraph it's on. I can tell Kathy, but
That's okay.
it just said environmental offenders of McHenry County Health Department. Just need to take off Health Department.
Got that, Kathy?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
If that changed, I would make my motion to approve.
With that change, we got a motion to approve, seconded by Carl. Any further discussion regarding the minutes? Seeing no discussion, we'll go to vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Minutes are done. Move on to public comment. Mr. Vanderspool is here this morning.
Is my mic here? Good morning, you know me. I'm Jan Vanderspool, 36-and-a-half-year resident at that address on your notes. Since August 2022, when my neighbor's ADU began to go under roof, I've been coming to meetings, including zoning and other county board meetings. My seething anger with what the county did to me with the concept of ADU as a right continues. I continue to ask that accessory dwelling unit permits require notification to adjacent neighbors. I continue to ask that the county notify all applicants that covenants enforced only by court action may supersede county allowances. Please understand that an ADU is a rental unit, certainly in the long term. Consistent with previous proposals, I have some minor additions. I request consideration that the concept of by right be removed in all instances. Permitted is a far cry from by right. I cannot conceive that estate single family denotes anything not understandable. I cannot conceive how any so-called national housing crisis can so easily usurp the concept to create rental units literally everywhere. How can my 36-year expectation be cracked so directly? I propose that estate zoning not be included in ADU permitted, that a new zoning designation be created for allowing as many rental units that will fit beyond that use for apartment complexes or businesses, and requiring one owner-occupied resident. Don't call it estate, don't call it single family. Let's get blunt. County notification for all permits that covenants can be enforced may supersede county allowances. Sorry, it's kind of out of order. Is completely ignored in the current agenda that was discussed in the last meeting. Even after acknowledging by staff that notification to applicants in the case of chicken quantity variation is generally communicated, as well as highly vocal local administration, I forgot the name of it, in a development. Selective notification needs to stop. With the amount of communication since August, I asked for assistance to bring the new PED members up to speed on what has previously been talked about. Please don't accept today's response as complete based on today's submission. Please take time to finish discussing what was started in the last years. I think the November variation in the agenda of over 12% size increase shows that the process just keeps steamrolling on despite vocal objections. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. So, Peter, Gussie's name is on here. Are you Peter?
Yes, I am.
And you're here for the interview?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Then you don't really...
I thought it was just a sign-in sheet.
Yeah, no, okay, that's fine. We'll just take that off for right now, and we'll have the interview in a couple minutes.
Good.
So public comment, is there anyone else from the public? Don't see that. So we go to members' comments. Anyone from the members would like to speak? Okay, I'll speak. Oh, you want to, John?
I did. I just wanted to say something about last month's meeting. We really didn't get to discuss in P&D, and it was my first feedback, so I didn't really realize that P&D didn't discuss the zoning that was put on from the Nunda Township in Route 31. And I think we made a mistake to not have that previously discussed by us. I hope that we would probably try to adhere that we don't take that to the board floor without a board discussion or committee discussion. I think we made them, you know, I'm not saying that it would have passed or it would have been denied. I'm not saying that we did this anybody wrong, but I am saying that we really didn't take it through committee. We should have.
No, we don't ever take it to go. It's a zoning change, it's a zoning
Yeah.
request, it never comes
So
here for a vote.
yeah, it goes
We
to
can- we can
public
talk
meeting at
about it, but
ZBA.
Yeah, this
goes-
came on at the last minute, and I didn't have any previous time to look at it, really. Maybe that's my issue with the most, Joe, is we didn't get it, but I didn't at least get to study it. You know, after looking at this a little bit more, I can think of so many more ways why this was a good fit. It was 5-2, and I just think we need more time to look at these things. I think this is an injustice.
Okay. That's fine. We're not going to discuss each one of them here.
No,
That's,
I respect that. I respect that. But I'm saying, you know, it was slapped on our desk right before the meeting. You know.
There were some unusual circumstances because of the holidays and the new committee setup.
Yeah. But, you know, I could tell you why, and I won't, but, you know, I don't mean to sound preachy in any way, but without a few days, I don't think anybody got to make an educated decision on that.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, I got a couple things, I guess. We got a couple of new members in the committee, Carl Kaminsky, Lou Nest. Jim and John are new, but they've been here and been on the board for a long time, so welcome to the committee. We have a presentation today, and it's going to be a little bit of a longer meeting, I think. So I anticipate that around 10 or 10:15, we'll take a break. If we can see we're finishing up by 10:30, that's, you know, then we finish up. That's, if you need to excuse yourself, just feel free to excuse yourself, whatever. You know, hopefully everyone has their phones on silent. And that's about it, I guess. It's sort of a relaxed committee, I think, and as long as we respect each other's time on the floor, like when John's speaking, we're not interrupting or something like that. It'll be fine. Anything else from the members? Nothing else. We'll move on to new business. And the first business of the day is Mr. Gussie for the Historic Preservation Commission interview. So if you'd like to step up to the end of the table, everything we do here is on video and audio, and so that's the speaker just on this side of that silver laptop there. Yeah. Okay. I'm Larry Smith from District. Yeah, feel free to sit down. I'm Larry Smith from District 8, and I'd ask to go around the table and introduce ourselves to Mr. Gussie.
John Reiner, District 2.
Jim Kearns, District 9.
Lou Ness, District 7.
Carolyn Campbell, District 3.
Carl Kaminsky, District 6.
Joe Gadamo, District 4.
Okay, if you'd like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your interest in the historic preservation.
My name is Peter Gussie. I've lived out in McHenry-Lake for about 45 years now. I own a business up in Richmond, and I am part of the W.A. McConnell Foundation, which is a historic preservation group based out of Richmond. We kind of came together a little over a year ago when we saw that there was some issues with buildings getting sold and tore down in the Richmond area. We were able to step in and save the old cotting house known as Old Number 90, which was a 1844 building, the oldest building in Richmond and one of the oldest in northern Illinois. We're currently in the grant process stage right now for getting it restored. We're also working, sort of brokering for the owner of the old Solon Mills Railroad Depot. We had been trying to find a place to move it, which we found difficult to find a good place to put it, but we're now working with a private owner who wants to pay to move it and restore it as a railroad-themed restaurant. And they plan on landmarking it then so that nothing can happen to it in the future. There's a couple others that we're in the process of looking into as well. So that I think our work would dovetail very nicely with the commission. And I'd like to be able to help out a little more with that.
Okay. Any committee members have any questions for Mr. Gussie? Go ahead, Jim.
I only, not so much a question, I just want to say I'm looking at your resume and that, I do respect your passion. I think it takes a passion for this position.
I appreciate that.
Of salvaging and saving these old buildings.
And on salvaging, we just actually salvaged materials from the old cheese factory that got burnt down in Richmond. Unfortunately, it happened without any demolition permitting, so we never didn't find about it until beforehand, but we're going to be able to use some of those foundation stone materials and stuff to rebuild the foundation of the other building we're working on.
Okay. Anyone else? It looks, correct me if I'm wrong, Adam, it looks like we have a 2-year term and a 5-year term up. And do you have a preference? Or,
You know, considering I plan on doing this long term, I wouldn't mind going for the 5-year position, but, you know, I don't want to step on toes of anybody else who's got more seniority in doing this.
Okay.
Which, my professional, is telling me that 5 years would be eligible, that you'd be eligible to go for the 5 years.
Okay.
The 2-year term currently is occupied by someone who's been on the commission. She's still serving. For some reason, she hasn't reapplied, but I'm working on her to reapply. So if we could fill the 5-year, that would be cleaner.
Yeah, okay. Sounds fine. Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Gussie. I appreciate that you came in to apply for this
If
position.
you guys have any other questions afterwards, you have my contact information. I'd be
Yep.
happy to answer any questions.
Okay.
Have a good day.
Yep, thank you. Now we're going to move on to new business 5.2, deliberation and selection for the Historic Preservation Commission.
We only have one candidate. Go
Okay.
ahead, Jim.
I think he's a perfect candidate
Yes,
for this
Okay.
position. And I would move that we approve him
I'll
for the
second
5-year term.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Kearns, seconded by Mr. Gademauer.
I concur.
Any more, any discussion regarding Mr. Gussie for this position?
I like the fact that he has, he's basically doing this position in another line of work right now as a volunteer. With that background, I think he's a perfect fit.
Yeah, I agree, he's the fit, yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, okay. Well, then we'll go to vote. There's no other discussion. Jim?
Yes?
John?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Carl?
Yes.
Carolyn?
Yes.
Lou?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. So Mr. Gussie will be put up for the 5-year term, and it'll go to the full board on the next week, I guess. Now we're going to the presentation.
Right.
And Adam waits years for this.
Yeah, so exciting. I'm excited to be in front of all of you. Some returners. We'll give you some people that have been here for a couple terms. We'll give you some updates on our statistics, but kind of twofold. So every January, our department provides the annual statistics. And that's largely driven by the 2030 plan, where we will provide what kind of zoning petitions, what kind of land use petitions, the overall numbers, the volume, what's coming in front of the meeting. And then on top of that, who we are. So the departmental overview, I want to introduce some of our players from around here. We do have one joining online, Joanna Coletti. She had a little bit of a ski snafu on her right knee. So she's, I hope she can hear us. She texted me about 2 minutes ago and said that it was mute on her end, but we'll see if we can get her in.
I know a little bit about knees.
Yeah, it seems to be, there's some folks around here, self-included, where I think we bought a condo for a couple of the orthopedic surgeons.
Absolutely.
Knees and hips. Yeah. P&D, our mission statements in front of you here, to direct the orderly development of the county through our ordinances. That paragraph there is summarized by service. So that's our focus, is service to our customers, service to this committee, service to the board, service to the tax dollar. So working efficiently, working effectively. Service doesn't mean giving people yeses, and certainly doesn't mean just telling them no. Sometimes it's that blend, that education blend, and telling people what it'll take for us to say yes, and without designing it for them. So there's that fine line. That's our approach, and we extend that kind of in all 5 of our divisions represented there by the logos below the county logo. Our org chart, this is our team that does it. This is our approach. We have 5 divisions. In a moment, I'll ask the division managers to introduce themselves. Kind of, hey, these are the people that you're going to see here, and kind of what capacity they're going to see. But I'll tell you before they start, I rely on them every day. And those 5 managers, myself, the 6 of us have ongoing communications, whether it's text, email, Teams, whatever it is. So if you can't get a hold of me, get a hold of one of us, and we'll be in communication. With that, I don't know who wants to start, but I'll start with Renee. We'll go around the horn.
Sure, why not? I'm Renee Hanlon. I'm in the center there. I'm the deputy director, I'm the planning manager, and I'm the zoning enforcement officer. So my division is me and 3 other powerful women, and together we're overseeing the rewrite of the 2050 comprehensive plan. We staff the Zoning Board of Appeals, the McHenry County Hearing Officer, the Historic Preservation Commission, the Regional Plan Commission. We process all of the zoning petitions that come through. And what else do we do? We enforce the zoning ordinance as well.
It's a big one.
So that's in a nutshell what we do in the planning division.
And as part of that too, I'll add, with the zoning petitions, Renee, or myself, or another representative from their division will come every month to this committee and give you a heads up of what's coming down for this month's meeting.
Good morning, everyone. Hans Mott, Community Development Administrator. Our office manages federal grant programs, and we also manage the local senior services tax dollars. We work with 3 different commissions, the Continuum of Care, the Senior Services Grant Commission, and the CDBHG Commission, to work with making those funding decisions and recommendations to the county board. Obviously, from this chart, we have a total of 6 of us that are full-time staff working on our grant programs. They include CDBG, which is Community Development Block Grant, the Home Investment Partnerships Program, which is for affordable housing, continuum care funding. We have the senior services, as I mentioned before, the Lead Safe Homes Program, and we're currently winding down our Treasury Emergency Rental Assistance Program that's been going on for about 2 years now. So very big program, over $16 million of funding just for that program alone. In our 5-year plan, we have over $52 million planned out for the work that we're doing. So there's just a lot of regulations and things, but either way, as Adam mentioned earlier, we have a great team of people that help us to work and facilitate all of it.
Ms. Cindy?
Hello, good morning. I'm Cindy McGee. I'm the administration manager. So we handle the administration staff that's at the front of the office. So we are the first point of contact when you call, you email, you apply online, or you're at the counter. We have 2 administrative specialists and 2 permit technicians. And we have a new technician coming on board next week because with COVID, as you'll explain later on, we have gone from 5% online to over 50%, and then the online productivity is really at 80%. So later we'll get into hopefully a new online permit system and become very efficient. We also handle FOIA requests. If you have any questions about any of that, come and see me.
Cindy's division is the heart of the operation, for sure. They keep everything moving. And Steve?
How's that for a segue from permits? I'm Steve Gardner. I am the building code enforcement officer. So a little bit since I've been here since 2019, we've moved from inspections into building division management. So what we take hold of is the plans that Cindy processes through and gets it to the staff and goes down the pecking order, starting with zoning. So when we get to the building division, we have 3 plans examiners and myself to fill in any gaps. And then we have the building inspectors, which also, make sure everybody that's hammer swingers out in the field get it put together correctly. And then we can't forget about the plumbing inspector. So once we get the plans able to be launched, we get them out, and then everyone goes out and inspects it in the field, try to get those products safe. One of our biggest hurdles today was going to the 2021 codes. That was a large undertaking. We got that, and the end result of that is going to be your ISO hours are going to keep your insurance rates down, because when a municipality or a county has current codes, your ISO rates get reflect on that. If you have a county or a municipality that does have older codes, their ISO hours don't actually get to excel as we do, since we have current up-to-date codes. So that being said, hand it back to Adam, and Joanna is online. So
Adam, Joanna can hear us or not?
Joanna?
She's on.
He's on.
You guys hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. Good morning. I'm Joanna Folletti, Water Resources Manager, Chief Stormwater Engineer. So our division is tasked with administration of the Stormwater Management Ordinance, which is a countywide ordinance. Jim Kearns is the current chair of our Stormwater Management Commission, which is made up of 6 county board members and 6 municipal members. We're in the process of filling in our 6 municipal members at this moment. Since the county board did redistrict last year, and you guys are fully familiar with your district, we had to modify the current Stormwater Management Commission district. So we still have 12 members at Stormwater Management Commission, but we do need to elect new commissioners for the municipal side of things. Other than that, like I said, we do have our Stormwater Management Ordinance countywide. It came into play in 2004. The most recent was in 2020. Once we get the new board seated at our commission, I'd like to present some new amendments. Minor stuff, but we do those probably every other year, so you'll see those come through, and then each municipality would adopt the county stormwater management ordinance also. We have certified communities and non-certified communities. Our planning and development deals with the unincorporated areas of McHenry County with the ordinance, and some of our smaller communities, 8 of them, those are considered our non-certified. Certified communities are capable and able to administer and enforce the stormwater ordinance themselves. They do or can request our assistance for technical assistance, or they can defer to us for permitting purposes, but for the most part, each one of those guys is certified, goes through the process and issue stormwater management permits themselves. We also do other activities on the non-regulatory side. You'll see in your packet we do have the United States Geological Survey, joint funding agreement for our groundwater wells and surface water gauge. So that's coming up. We have 3-year contracts with them to ensure that we have adequate supplies of groundwater and what we're looking at long-term and short-term with respect to those wells. We partner with USGS on that. Kuykendall is our water resources specialist, and he deals with non-regulatory side of things. We just finished up a couple years ago the RAP, the Water Resources Action Plan. So he's in the process of education and getting out into the public and giving presentations on those types of things. Sensible Bulk is another one that we work on with respect to staff here in-house, DOT, health department, and then also out in the public. We do have 3 engineers on staff, and we do have our wetland specialist, Gussie, who is with the Soil Water Conservation District. We have an agreement with them for her to do our wetland work. We also work with one of the other staff there at Soil Water Conservation District when we have larger projects, as our inspections for field work. And other than that, if there's any questions, by all means, let me know.
Thank you, Joanna.
You're welcome.
And highlighted in here, there's 2 other positions. There's McSeat, which used to be, we had a McHenry County Environmental Education, Schools Education Program. That person used to be housed within our office. 2 years ago, they went under the envelope of environmental defenders. So while we still fund that position, that role, we still communicate, they're just not in our office. And then the code enforcement coordinator is a direct report to myself. And that person floats among 3 divisions that deal with the permits and the enforcement of their ordinances. We'll talk a little bit more about that specific position and what the latest trends have been and where we think that position will go in the future. But kind of moving from the org chart to this is our team, and segueing from that department overview to the annual report. This is, everybody knows the rebranding. This is a department meeting we had in July that we did a little exercise that now became one of our onboarding, a part of our onboarding program, where we paint our MCH logo. So everyone's got one. This is everybody's masterpiece that day, and just something kind of fun to do. But this team here behind us, behind me, they're yours, they're ours. And if I can't answer it, we can answer. These are the experts that will give us those answers. In terms of the work that we do, we're kind of 2 different types. We have the large scale, which would be special projects, and up here is a snapshot of some of the agencies that we are informed by. The International Code Council writes our building codes. FEMA sets a framework for our stormwater management ordinance. Some of our partners, the Mavis 5 and the inspectors with the fire districts in McHenry County, work with 18 different fire districts. Sheriff's Division, Sheriff's Department. When there's a late night call, they'll be the ones that call us to send somebody out if they want to get in from a fire or a car in the building. Then we've got some of our other partners that are really, we either work as an extension of, or we got boots on the ground doing the rental assistance program that Hans mentioned. That's through the Treasury Department. HUD, IDA, neighborhood stabilization, subsidizing rent, all of these various programs that funnel through our office. And then some of the end users, the Senior Services Associates has numerous different grants and programs that are funded by the county to help with anything from cleaning the house to putting groceries away to getting dumpsters for hoarding situations. And then USGS, that's one that Joanna mentioned and will be in your packet here, a groundwater monitoring network that kind of take the Pepsi challenge against anybody in the country. It informs a lot of what we do, not just from the actual use standards and our ordinances, but in the development, it sets the framework for some of our ability to grow as a county. So before you there is the sensitive aquifer recharge area. These are areas that our ordinance is now steered towards protecting so that water can filter back into the ground safely, cleanly, and we can pump it out and use it as we see fit. We're going through that same process with the 2050 comprehensive plan right now. This map comes from the 2030 plan. So now we have 10 years of data from those well monitoring networks that tell us how those maps have evolved through the years, tell us what the groundwater quality is. So just a little bit of a snapshot. These are the big projects. And then we've got the day-to-day. And that's really what the 2030 plan, the comprehensive plan, asks us to come report on every year, is what happened this year. We always start that conversation with zoning, with land use. Before you is the same data, one in chart, one in a graph. I'm going to try to color correspond them a little bit, but we've got 3 different main categories and then a 4th one, and then the overall, the number of petitions that are filed. At our board orientation, we talked about and highlighted the quantity. How many of these are going to come before you? It's 50 this year. It's been 51.4 over the last 5. So a little over 4 per month are going to be before you for consideration. Each one of those will be a little bit different. We'll talk about kind of the general classifications, but each one of those, if you've got questions on them, bring them in. Bring them in and we can kind of talk through that. There's going to be a set of regulations to vote on. We talked about that a little bit, and we'll continue to highlight those. And then anything else we can provide as far as painting a picture. First one we'll highlight here is going to be reclassifications. So these are changes to the underlying zoning. 18 this year, not a huge number, but 18 or less, and they all have different representations. One of the types that you'll see, reclassification types that you'll see frequently, is an A1 to an A2. This, as well as some of the state zoning, these are really market driven. This enables folks to take a house, a homestead from a farm that's on an A1 property. A1 is really intended for agricultural uses while it allows a single family residence. The A2 is geared towards having a single family residence in association with agricultural property. So this transition from A1 to A2 allows the property owner to continue to farm that A1 property and market the A2 property as a legal. So you'll see that transition frequently, and nothing changes contextually to that use or the enabled use. On the left, this adds a little bit of area to it. So what's the actual footprint of these reclassifications? There's kind of an ongoing dialogue of what happens with the county, how much of it is transitioning out of agricultural or how much is transitioning to a suburban feel. And this is the acreage of some of those modifications that have been associated with the reclassifications. To paint a picture of just how much of a drop in the bucket 96 acres is, which is the total of acreage that's been reclassified this year. We have approximately 288,000 acres in the county. So it's I forget even what it is, 0.3%, I think I wrote down in here. It's a very low number. So we're not losing much, not transitioning much. 18 petitions, unless we have a 2,500, 3,200 square acre or an acre solar farm. That's kind of a drop in the bucket. Variation requests. Mr. Gadamal is famous for saying anybody can petition their government. And when we have our unified development ordinance, it's a set of standards, it's an ordinance, it's a guideline. Any ordinance standard in there, any code in that ordinance can be changed. So what we see here typically is gonna be setbacks. Setbacks, also represented through height on the far left. People need to, whatever the configuration of their site, they need to build it a little bit closer to the lot line, whatever it might be. That's the type of request we see. Another one I'd highlight here is at the very top, number of chickens. There's a set standard for having 6 chickens and no roosters. This year we had an applicant request 36 or 38, I forget what the exact number was, but much higher. It's their right to ask. We will package that petition up. You may look at us a little cross-eyed, like, what in the world did you bring this forward to us for? But that's our job. We will bring it forward, any request that is suitable against you. Conditional uses. Did you have a question, Joe?
Yeah, I just had variations. How many did we approve?
You know what? How many did we approve?
Yeah,
That
'cause
is.
I think the chickens and roosters went down. But I don't remember. If you don't remember, that's fine. I was just.
I'll find that number out.
Whatever, it sounds good, so.
Most of them, but not the chickens.
Yeah, the memorable ones when we have variations are standalone. Variations can be coupled with other petition requests, so conditional uses, or really frankly, that's it, conditional uses.
Just one
Yeah,
thing.
go ahead, Carol.
Do you mind, just one
Yeah.
thing, could you send that to us, the slide?
Yeah, I'll send you the whole deck.
Okay, that'd be
Yeah,
great.
absolutely. Conditional uses, these are gonna be different uses that people are allowed to have, but they have to come through the county board in order to actually do them. And they'll have certain standards that they have to meet. The county board, the zoning board of appeals, they can set specific requirements for this use. So we see landscape businesses or reception facilities on here. That's a pretty predominant one in our area. The standards, some of the standards that may be applied to them are operating hours. And we want you to shut down by midnight, by 2. We don't want you to start a landscape business before 6 a.m. or something along those lines. Just those kind of items that they'll largely be put together by the zoning board of appeals from a standards, typical standards for that particular use. We had 17 this calendar year. Again, of the 50 that we're through, so it's a little bit more than 1 a month for a conditional use. And all of these do go through the zoning board of appeals. And you'll see a transcript for their voting meeting. And you'll see that for each of the petition types that I've shown you so far today. The last public meeting is one that you folks would be the petitioners for. These would be the text amendments. So when we adopted the Unified Development Ordinance, it was intended to be a living document. And as we look at it every year, we find different things that either were unintentional consequences or thought that was going to pan out better or whatever it may have been. We're going to try something different. So every year we've had a couple rounds of amendments. This year's no different. This year we had our first subdivision under the Unified Development Ordinance. It wasn't a major one. It was a 3-parcel subdivision or re-subdivision. And we found a lot that could change. So that subdivision portion of the ordinance has been, it would be gladly revamped. Another piece, and the final one on the zoning activity, is zoning buildability letters. This has always been put in there because it is a large assignment every year for our folks. Essentially it's a staff report that says to the potential buyer or the current property owner that you can build a house, or this is the proper zoning for this proposed use, or this is, it's a letter from us that says this is what you can kind of do generally on your property. And those trend at about 40 over the past 5 years. The past couple of years, though, they've been above that. So 45, 52, 49 this year. The one really nice thing that we've done, Renee instilled this program, was to retain them. Not that we threw them out, but now we've married them with the parcel. So if someone requests a buildability letter, previously, we would redo it, and we had duplicates. And thank goodness they didn't, they matched, they were varying agreements. But now they can benefit the next owner. If something falls through, or hey, I won the lottery, I'm gonna move to Aruba type thing, we can hand that to the next owner.
Larry?
Yep,
Go ahead.
I don't know if this is a good time for it, because we're on zoning. Were you moving off of zone? Yeah, so you're
Yep.
moving off. So just real quickly, to kind of get to your point, when we have these, we don't actually discuss and then vote on zoning
No.
issues that go before the zoning. But, so Renee will come in and we'll have that little list like we do now of the things that are going to be coming before the board. But we don't really actually get the detail until that Friday before the board meeting, which with everything else is a lot of information. And because a lot of that does kind of involve what we do here, I would almost find it helpful, without creating too much more work, is if in this list you could say what the hearing dates were, so we could, sometimes it's just easier for me to pop in the hearing, right, and do it while I'm driving somewhere, as opposed to having to go and read through all the manuscript right before our board meeting. So like if, if there were two different dates, like for the, I don't remember how to pronounce the name, the Gussie or the, right? So it's just that would be helpful. Maybe that gets to what you're talking about, where we can just get that information up front.
We can certainly add that to the chart that we give you, the
Yeah.
one-page handout. You can put the dates on there.
Yeah, just
File a
something.
link. Maybe even be able to, since they're all they're all going to be in the meeting portal, we may even be able to provide a link for that hearing.
Yeah, because that,
Well, you'll have two different links depending on what it is.
Yeah, the
Right,
voting.
right.
Like conditional use is probably going to have a voting meeting
Yeah.
where they will have to be different from the hearing.
correct. But it's like you're going through the meetings, which you're kind of guessing at which one it was
true,
on.
yeah.
And then you got to pull up the agenda and then, okay, that wasn't it, and you go.
Well, that would just give us more to frame, I think, to that
Yeah.
point, where we would have hearing date 1, maybe 2, 3, shouldn't have many more than that, we could. And then we would have a voting meeting. That would be another item that we could put on there for sure. Yeah.
That's something we could do? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's, would be helpful,
Great
yeah.
idea.
Thank you.
Any other questions on zoning? Because we are going to move off of that. All right, no problem. We always come back. From the buildability letters, natural extension from there was to look at FOIAs. FOIA activity, that's largely going to be Cindy's division, and then a little bit with Hans's division in terms of the community development and some of the other documents that would flow through them. The concept that I want to highlight with FOIAs is that it's been remarkably stable, even though we've had this big dip through 2020. We've made such a big effort to digitize our old records. And permits going back to 1944, and then we had some different formats that we've transferred into now one repository. And really, at this point in time, the only records that aren't scanned are the ones that are active files. Once we have a certificate of occupancy or certificate of completion, our staff scans them, puts them on base. They're available. Now, that's not all the records that people want. They'll have various requests, and that's what will go into the FOIA request. But I would highlight that we have, and really through Dan and Greg and their group in IT, is they've put on an electronic record search for us on our website. But it just doesn't seem to be utilized as much as it could. So I guess I'm not speaking to you, but I'm speaking into the microphone for the future record that we do have those available. We do have FOIA requests that still are mounting, and that's just one of the things I would highlight with FOIAs. We try to give you everything we possibly can because it'll save time for us as well. Code compliance, we have seen a big transition in our code compliance, if you will. It's not a division at the moment, but it's trending that way. We had the retirement of one of our longest employees, Deb Sorensen, in 2020. And she knew everybody. She had an innate ability to remember and recall and keep people on the track and negotiate. When she left, we had another hire that came in, good, fruitful, but he ended up relocating, and it gave us cause to reevaluate this position. We weren't going to find another Deb Sorensen that had this inherent knowledge of the county, and so we put our brains together and we came up with who that ideal person was, and it was a cop. And we shook the trees and we found a retired former deputy chief, Crystal Lake, 27 years with Crystal Lake, everything from midnight beat up to the deputy chief role. Someone that can handle the volume that really comes in, the inspections, the investigations, what's valid evidence, what's not, what's really, hey, listen, you're talking about something that's really not negotiable, having those hard conversations. And right from the get-go. So it didn't take more than 2 months for this gentleman to get us caught back up from that 2021 lag where we didn't have anybody for a period of time, and then we were training for that other portion of the year. The volume that this, if you will, division sees is high. We see 602 complaints received. These are the ones that are valid. These are the ones that are true blue. They have a deck without a permit. They have a pool without a permit. They have something that they've done that's regulated that they should have gotten a permit for. What's filtered out of there, and one of the big transitions that kind of realize, hey, this isn't right. What's filtered out of there are the complaints that are unfounded. Our system right now isn't suitable for this use. We have to kind of work outside of it and backfeed it and work outside of it in paper forms or spreadsheets. And county board members, realtors, brokers, land use attorneys, property owners, the only way we could do that before was to file a violation and then back it out. That's not fair. We didn't want to do that anymore, so we stopped and we found a different process to do that. So it dropped from 870, 880 on average down to the 600s. And it's been successful, but it's time consuming. So I guess I just highlight that when it comes to what this individual is. And then I pair that 602 number to what we're about to look at here in permits. So now we're moving into general permits, and these are going to be building permits, stormwater management permits, and temporary use permits. We have seen this number continue to rise and rise and rise. This is an overall, and in the next slide we'll look at some of the detailed breakdowns of what the building permit types that make up that 1,294 number. But this is a really good side-by-side comparison. This year we have far eclipsed where we've been in the past. We are almost 200 over on average for the last 5 years, and it's just trending that way. And we are busy. There's just no lull, and that's good. We like being busy, but it's presented several other challenges. We'll get to those, but first, this is kind of the fun stat and the fun breakdown. The column on the second to the right, second last to the right, the FY22, that's this year's numbers. And these are the general large block permit types that we see. So the first one we always talk about is going to be single family residences. We have 43 single family residences. I'll point it out for you, Joe. There's 22 demos. Yeah. There's 22 demos.
Yeah.
So of those 22 demos, I'll highlight that 5 of those are ours. 5 of those are the stormwater floodplain buyouts, and then 3 of them, are the abandoned property demolitions. There's no new houses going in on those properties now or soon, but some of the other trends that we've seen, non-residential, non-housekeeping permits. This is one, I looked at that number and I thought, all right, I have to look at what those permit types are. So there's 76 permit types, and they're detached garages, or storage sheds, pergolas, gazebos. They're kind of fun accessory structures. In 2020, we saw a lot of people fixing their house, their home. 2021, same thing. Now their basements are finished. They don't have any place to store stuff. You know, that was kind of the conclusion I came up with on this, but it is a general permit. If there's anything else. You know what, there is one. For the year, the county, based on the U.S. Census Bureau, the county has constructed, this is all municipalities, 628 single-family residences, and then adding 97 multifamily, so 725 units this year for the county as a whole. The number, you know, plus or minus, I can tell you when I looked at the county statistic on there, I think it's at 38. So it's a little off, potentially. Maybe they pulled the trigger early on our stance.
For the old folks, in 2002 was the record. At that point, in 2002, 4,252 single-family homes were built in McHenry County. So we are 1/5 of that. That was 1 year. I'm not saying I necessarily want to do that. I think it's important to know what the difference was in the county.
For sure.
From its absolute building peak to where it is today.
Yeah. So the permit numbers that we looked at in that previous slide, where they were all aggregated together, that's represented on the bottom three rows. Building permits as a whole, 1294. Stormwater permits, 159, and temporary use permit.
Just solar accessory.
Yep.
Is that like on individual properties? Or
Yeah.
just roof, I mean, I was thinking accessory is off the house, but that's on the house?
That's on the house and off, but
Okay.
most of those 170, I can't tell you that we've had more than a handful of ground-mounted systems.
Okay,
But
so those
yeah.
are mostly on the house?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that program it continues to be subsidized by the federal government, and they found different ways, whether they're long-term leases, agreements, or finding ways to buy them out, that homeowners continue to capture that. It's seems successful. Everyone that's put them on is raved about not having to pay comment.
Well, I would advocate that we try to promote geothermal on all these new developments. Because I think we were the first one to put it in a residential for the county,
Yeah?
I believe, or at least for sure in Crystal Lake. But
Yeah.
new development would be
It's a good system.
It's a
It
great
takes
system.
a little bit of engineering work, but yeah, they can be costly, but in the end, cost effective if done properly.
I think, didn't Woodstock put geothermal for the courthouse?
Did they?
Yeah, they tore
Yeah.
up the parking lot across the street, put geothermal in, and it will run the courthouse.
That's great.
The old courthouse.
Yeah.
Which is why I advocate for doing it with new construction, because it's so much cheaper. I mean,
Yeah.
the cost is really if you retrofit, right? So,
Right.
anyway, sorry. I
That's fine.
digress.
That's what we're here for.
All right. To look at these a little bit in a different light, I provided a stat that we haven't provided in the past, but we do collect this data economically. This is an economic translation of the building permits that we've done. So many of you have applied for building permits in your jurisdiction. I've applied for several here and outside. Every permit application has kind of the same information request: name, number, scope of work, and construction value. You don't have to show me your hands, but that number is always an underestimate. Exactly. This is the number that we've accrued over the last 5 years. So $67 million is what people are telling us.
Probably means 126.
Or 180. But looking, and this follows the trends that we've kind of expected. In 2020, people were at home. They had economic stimulus. The shutdown was right around the time people got their tax refund, and they were cash. They had cash in hand and a lot of time on their hands. $81 million is not a shock to us at all. 35 was a little weird in 2019, but again, these are underestimates. So I throw that out there. One is, it's good to know, good to see, but it's a big economy. It's just a big economy. Each one of these represents all the various vendors, all the various producers, manufacturers, workers, etc. We look at our month-to-month workload. Now this doesn't tell you folks much on its surface, but when we start toothing this in with what we're going to look at here in a minute, it relates. So we can kind of see we have, right now in Januaries are always really slow right after the holidays. Everyone's cleaning, not working on their house just yet. And then we get into the construction season. What these bars represent, the blue, are the number of reviews that we have every month, the reviews that we complete. So when we get a permit application in and the time we respond to it to send a letter or we issue that. The gold bars are the permits that we issue every month. So we see that trend and we pair it immediately with efficiencies. For the last 5 years, we've had this goal of 90% of our reviews are turned around, completed within 14 business days. This year was the first year that we did that, and we're elated. It's not only to have done it, but to have done it in the wake of the volume that we face. It's remarkable, and it's really a testament to the people in that picture, the people behind me. I kind of joked at our budget presentation that it was trending that way. We were above 90%, and we were just holding on for the last couple of months. And the cause was just me getting out of the way, and maybe it was, but they haven't told me that. But it's a lot of work that goes into this, and I'm just proud of our team for doing it.
So some of it would be because of the online permitting and.
So I would say that some of it would be in spite of the online permitting.
Okay.
That's a heck of a transition, a heck of a segue. So our numbers, and this is just kind of a brief summary, taking the numbers that we have and putting it with that efficiency model. So what we've already talked about in terms of the number of permits and the number of reviews in the gold bar at the very top, the number of permits we issued every year, and then our efficiencies. So the numbers have gone up, and so has our efficiencies. As we're working with a system that was installed in 2010. For many of you that have been on this board recently or back then, you're aware that we've been working on a permit software replacement project since at least 2013 when I got it. And they were in development stages, so 2012. We're no closer. And we can talk about the details of that project offline. And I don't want to go down that hole, but we're no closer to having that executed today, unfortunately. But we have far bigger need. And so when we look at our online submissions, this is 2019. We opened it up. IT created a web portal. That web portal allows people to put their information and upload documents, and then it takes that information and sends us an email. We created a position to handle those emails, permit tech. So they take those emails and they review it for completeness, and then they transfer that information into our permit system. And then they transfer those files out. Sometimes they have to print them. And I'll say sometimes, it's often, because people find the convenience of emailing these documents. It is. We have, to give you an idea of how often that happens, our revenue line item for printing costs is estimated every year at $2,500. This past year, it eclipsed $15,000 because we're printing out documents for people. And we could eat it based on your direction, but we would be eating a big chunk of money, so those are transferred costs. We don't have a means. We're working on it. This isn't a complaint. We need help from you. We're working on a digital review process, and part of that is how do we integrate that digital review process with what we have coming in online. And the answer to that is this online system. Unfortunately, that project is just at a stall right now, and we're trying to work through. But to continue that picture, to paint that picture, where we're at. 5%. And then when 2020 hit, we had everyone hit. Digital push, 46%. So we had a 41% increase that first year. And then we had an incremental increase to 48%. And then as Cindy stated, our online presence has bounced up from 48, 50%. In 2022, we opened it up for not only permit applications, but resubmittals. And our permit traffic is going up to 80% online, which is great for that initial, for that convenience factor, but it has put a huge burden on, it's on our staff. It's like driving a Honda Focus or a Honda, whatever, a tiny little car, and then getting into off-roading and trying to off-road with that tiny little car. It's been a bit of a challenge. And our people are working through it. Once we get to that point where we're able to, we have a large amount of potential to have things go a lot smoother. We've deferred, we were approved in 2019 for a capital improvement project. When 2020 hit, we said, oh, let's pause and see what our workflow looks like. We're continuing to hit that pause button because we know where our workflow is going. We don't have the ability to necessarily suit that yet. So once we have that, that's our top priority, I guess is really what I'm saying. This year, and we're working on it daily, to set that up so that we can try to get this under this fiscal year to get us suitably online and address one of our needs. It's a pretty dramatic turn there at the end, sorry. Do we have any questions? That's kind of the state of where we're at, and then some of the statistics that back up how we got.
Anybody have any questions? Go ahead, Carolyn.
I was just going to say, I appreciate that honesty and approach to what your challenges are, because, I mean, I think sometimes you want to come in and give your best. I mean, that's a challenge that, you excelled in one area, which was getting them online. Now you got to find that segue to get that transition to where it's not so manual from that point to get it back in the system. So I appreciate that honesty.
Yeah, do you see the potential that you're going to be looking for more staff, or are you going to be, because it's switched over to online, shifting staff within the department?
So we've shifted staff. This past year, we did a transition from one of our admin positions to another permit tech. So we have permit tech 2 and a permit tech 1 that was effective this past December, and that person is the one that we just hired. And just through another move, we moved some folks around. So it's, we don't at this point in time, we don't see that is going to drive our full-time equivalents higher, but assuming that permit system comes in, that will be another staff member for us, maybe 2. It takes a lot of those clicks out. To give you an idea, that permit tech that enters those permits in, she does it every day, and those are 12 to 15 minutes to take those and have them processed and ready to go for staff to do their compliance review. When she's out, her backup, it takes about 20 to 25 minutes to do it. They don't do it every day as quickly as cleanly. So there's a drop off when she's not there, and to have one person carry that load is it's asking a lot.
Okay, and when you say the compliance check, that's check to make sure the zoning's right, check to make sure the setbacks are correct.
Correct.
I can't think of what else right now, but.
That's all good, yeah.
Yeah, get it in line so it can move forward.
Yes.
Or if it's not in line, get it back to the.
Yep.
Permit request. Lou, go ahead.
A further helping me to not be confused about which committee I'm on. Planning and development through community development supervises CDHG and CDBG, correct?
So, yeah, so Hans's division integrates and interfaces directly with CDHG.
So you actually report to 2 committees then? Public health? I'm just confused how affordable housing got housed at public health when it feels like it's a better fit. I could just be confused, which, not outside.
No, you're right, it is a little confusing, and they report to public health, Hans is CDHG, and it used to be that the chairman of this committee was chairman of CDHG, and about 2 years ago, was it? We flipped it because The idea being if they report to public health, then the chairman of public health should be the chairman of CDHG, and the chairman of PED, me, would be the vice chair then instead. I don't know if there's a good way to fix that or if it needs to be fixed. I think the public health has more to do with the senior services part of it.
Yeah, but I don't think public health has anything to do with affordable housing for middle, low income wage earners who don't require any additional community service support. They're just home buyers like you and I, but there's not a stock of affordable housing for working families. And so that to me, all the zoning and the building permitting and all, anyway, I find it's just confusing.
Yeah, Scott, you want to interject?
Yeah, if I could, and it is confusing, the question is where would it be best housed? The committee's public health and community services, which really include the social service programs that we administer primarily through Hans's office, which is why he reports up through PHC, at Public Health and Community Services. What we deal with mostly on the county level is the grant administration on the program level. The physical affordable housing, of course, that is a land use question. It would fall as land use decisions would come into this committee. It also falls on our municipal partners as they make their local land use decisions. So when we look at it from the county standpoint, you may see, if there's a development a proposal regarding affordable housing or something that needs to be done on a physical level, this committee would take a lot of touch in that. But most of what we do, correctly from Adam and Hans, is really on that program level, administering the grant funding and the CDBG funding to help our not-for-profit partners address those needs within our community.
Yes, and I don't know that every middle, low-wage earner needs not-for-profit assistance. What I'm saying, they're home buyers just like we are, but their income, if they're earning $17 an hour, they really can't afford to rent or buy and work in this county. That is not a social service issue. That is a municipal and a development, to me. And so I'm just trying to find where does it fit and how do we move a plan forward that's more cohesive and has some vision around workforce housing. I think if you're paying, and Hans and I have had this conversation, if you're paying 60% of your income to housing, right, that's not a social service issue. That's a wage housing stock issue. And so by putting a not-for-profit person in that mix, you're not going to increase that person's ability to pay a higher rent or a mortgage or even save money for a down payment. That there may be no mental illness, there may be no deprivation of the family. I just don't like assuming that when we have low-wage earners, they're married to that continuum of care structure, because I don't think that's accurate. However, I just want to know where, we talked about this at Public Health, so I grilled Hans at Public Health. I just want to know where would a group sit? Maybe it toggles both Public Health and P&D. Maybe it's in both places and not just, I don't know. I'm just asking Larry because I'm new. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's fine to ask. I don't know that I have the perfect answer on it because there is a lot of interaction between the two when it comes to those kind of subjects. So, John, did you want to say something?
Yeah, personally, I think that's a market-driven.
There's
dilemma.
what?
It's a market-driven dilemma because the reason that there are no houses that a $17 an hour person would be able to purchase is there's no profit in building one. So to build an 800 square foot house under $100,000, say, that would do that, would still require all the resources that a builder uses on, say, $1 million house, right? And how can he put all those resources in for, say, $6,000?
Well,
Right? So it's a market-driven thing, and I think it does tend to go over towards Hans because you're going to need people that are a little more philanthropic than profitable as to what we see and what you see, Adam. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, I don't think that that's a solvable problem for P&D, personally.
I just have a question, that's an interesting point. So how the CHG, whatever, the housing thing, for that commission, are the people on that, nobody really from this committee, you as vice chair, right? But everybody else comes off of, I don't remember how it gets seated for that committee.
Public Health chairs it, the chair of Public Health, and that would be Tracy Von Bergen, and I would be the vice chair, and everyone else would be from the community.
From the community,
Yeah.
okay. All right. So you still have representation from this committee?
Yeah, and if you look up the rules, I think we should try to get people from different districts. Hans, you gonna speak to that? I mean,
Yeah, it's 9 individuals that are from the community, so with our recent revision that's going to the county board this month, we're attempting to make sure all the districts are represented as the positions open and become vacant. So that was a change that was a result of the last election. But they're not community members. We encourage, people that are builders, bankers, teachers, whatever, accountants, to have a wide variety of individuals on there. It's always helpful for us. We have an engineer on our commission, always helpful for explaining those complicated projects. But we do look for representation from throughout the county.
And how many on the commission again?
There are 9 at-large members, and there are 2 in the county board.
Okay.
So total.
And I don't disagree with you. However, what the question I have is for home and CDBG and the continuum of care, they are expected to have a plan for preserving and expanding affordable housing, which we don't have. And it will take some stretching on both sides. But when you have someone who works in this county who's not making $35 an hour, they spend their money here, they use the school system, they do their they are part of the community. So how do we where does the question live that we explore how we put this plan together? And I think, to your point, it has to be something we haven't thought about before. And I don't know what that is by myself, but I do think maybe between public health and PE&D, there's a way to bring some community, municipal contractors, builders, I don't know.
yeah, go ahead, Joe, you want?
Well, one of the areas you look at that is we're in the process of redoing the 2050 plan. And one of those aspects is, do we have housing for the people that either live here now or will be living here in the future? So you do look at it, but you don't, we're not going to drive that specific program from this committee because we don't have that ability to do that. But we do have the ability to plan for it. And that's one of the things that a comprehensive plan does, is make certain you've got housing for everybody that might be coming. Now, sometimes you can really mess that comprehensive plan up because you can project that there's going to be 600,000 people living here in 2020 instead of the 300,000, because between 2008 and 2020 we didn't have anybody come. But that is one of the goals behind that, and one of the things the planning department does is look to say, how do we provide housing? By the way, if you want to see a great example of what can happen, McHenry, the town of McHenry just did this. In 2020, I think it was, it might have been 2019, either 2019 or 2020, they did their own rental study. And at the time they did the study, it turned out they found 16 houses or 16 places to rent in their town when they pulled it. What they don't tell you in the report is that 14 of those were a little old lady that was trying to sell them and hadn't rented 14 of those units for over 10 years, and in fact was fighting with the city about whether they condemned them. So they actually only had 2 places to rent in the town of McHenry when they did their study anywhere.
So
Any amount of
places to rent, Joe? Or?
Any rental, 2, that was it. And so they sat back as a town and said, and if you look and see what's been built in the last 2 or 3 years or is on the books, that's why the affordable housing people came in, because they went and looked and said, you're actually gonna let us in. If you look at what happened in most municipalities from, I would say, 1990 until 2015, I don't think any apartments were built in McHenry County, anywhere, any place.
In the
Between what
county.
years?
In the county,
Right,
in the county or in the municipality.
And that's a good
in that
discussion
time
too,
period.
because a
weren't
municipality
letting
has
them
the
in.
ability
I mean, which-
with the sewer, water,
I
and the right
get that.
zoning in the in-town lots,
So,
whereas
but-
we don't in the county.
But you can, I mean, there are ways to see that done, but, you know, when you look at for affordable housing, you need sewer and water. And if you don't have sewer and water, which we don't have, you're gonna have a tremendous more expense and probably not be eligible for it. But like I say, I look at McHenry and they finally sat down and said, you know what, as a town, we need a place for our, you know, students that who, you know, to come back to. And if you don't have that place, they don't come back.
I'm confused, you know, and shocked when you said there was only 4.
That-
I know of buildings that are apartments.
Yes,
How does
today,
that square?
but in 2020, no, that were available. They had them, but they were full up. There was
Yeah,
nothing available
okay.
to go get. So if you were coming into McHenry's market.
All right, that's what I wanted, like.
You had two, your realtor could pull up 2 places you could look at, and then you were done.
All right,
Because
yeah.
it was all filled.
Okay.
And nothing had been built literally for 30 years. The most recent thing, I think, was, I can't think of the name of it. There was one, it's off of 31, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of it, but that was the most recent thing that was built, and that was in the early 90s. And most towns felt themselves in the same position.
Well, or if they are doing affordable housing, they're doing senior housing, which doesn't help working families. And the only reason I asked Joe is because CDBG and CDHG are under community development, which reports to this committee. That was the only reason I asked. I mean,
Well, it also had to do with building permits.
yeah, you know, I just spent enough time in the affordable housing community
Yeah.
to be dangerous. So,
And a
well,
lot of
thank
it is-
you.
A lot of it is gonna be in the municipalities, because
Yeah.
that's really our
Would
long
you-
range plan is where there should be.
Would you share that figure you shared about the 4,500 families?
Oh, the figure is that 4,500 households, excuse me, that would be individuals, but these households are rent burdened, so that means they're 50% or more of their income is spent on rent, and about 3,000 of them are people with 30% or less of the area median income, so that's what we call a qualifying population. Now they're at high risk of becoming homeless.
I'm sorry, the 3,000 plus was what?
That would be individuals rent burdened at 50% or more and under 30% of the area median income. So under our new Home American Recovery Plan Act funds, that's considered homeless. It's a new designation that HUD has made. And so they would qualify for the housing. The allocations that were made were to Pearl Street Commons 2, which is the one in downtown McHenry that is for veterans. And the other one was Taylor Place, which would be near the McHenry train station. So McHenry is where the allocations were made because IDA has determined it's sort of a desert of affordable housing and they need more.
Makes sense. So I think there is in our future, a challenge that is going to be significant for us to face. And I would like to get ahead of the curve for my own self on that. And so that's why I asked, like, where do I live with this? Does it live with planning and development? Does it live with public health?
There's places for both.
It's with both. It's sounding like that. It toggles. So thank you for the conversation, Larry. And y'all, I appreciate it.
Okay. So we're settled with that, and it's a big conversation.
Yes,
And
it is.
And don't hesitate to keep pounding.
Well, gratefully, I'm less confused today than I was last week, so.
Okay, good.
That's good.
Okay, but we will.
All of us.
But let's let Adam move on.
That's what I got.
You're done with that part of the presentation?
The whole thing, yeah, unless there's another part you want me to wing.
Well,
One thing I'd like to comment on for you, Adam, as somebody that's used the system for the last 40 years or 30 plus years at least, you know, before it was when you went in there, they were like, how can I find something wrong with this permit application? Right? How many times can I make this guy go back and fix it? Something's gotta be wrong. And now it's like, how can I get this thing through and get this guy a permit? And I just think your attitude is where maybe you got it out of the way, but maybe you got your office dialed in, if you will, you know? Because there is a change.
Thank you for recognizing that. I mean, it is, I mean, it's this group.
And I'll agree with it. I purposely did a deck. You wouldn't believe how much deck I could build for $1,000. I mean, I went through the process, and the full intention of going in there and not asking for anybody that knew me or didn't know me. And it was my plans got turned down. I drew them myself, but it was very specific. You need this, you need this, you need this.
Yeah.
So then I could go back and address each one of those on one-by-one basis. And then the second time I come back, I was fine. It was way better than previous years. I just agree with John. And for anybody in the room, John and I are both realtors and builders, so we're used to dealing with the planning department. And it was always pretty stressful and unexplainable to your clients, the time and efforts that was needed to get a permit. But it's a lot better, lots better.
Good, great, and that's, the explanation is largely what we need to provide, the why.
Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
Oh,
Can you correlate the ease of permits versus the number of enforcement violations? Because I'd be willing to bet you that easy part of getting permits
could be a dip.
makes it easier for people to comply. I do know for years at the beginning, I would have people who would come in and say, yeah, they nabbed me for this or that or whatever, and we'd be fighting over it, and it was really just, it was so insurmountable to get a permit, they just figured they'd wing it and see if someone would beat them up.
Well, they would always change the goal line. So
Yeah.
one person to tell you this, next person to tell you that, and
Yeah.
then you go by what the one person said, and then you want to be in compliance. So anyway, congratulations, and to all the staff members too. It's better.
Thank you all. And we'll try to kind of dial that in. Maybe we make a tick mark on the violations on how many people say, like, I would come, but you guys are a pain.
No, but you had some things, and we talked about this before, but you had some things that it cost more to get the permit than it did to build the structure.
Yeah.
And it was like, why am I doing this? And those, it seems we had the cart before the horse on those kind of things. It never made any sense to me that I would spend more to get a permit than to actually build the item.
And that's fair, and that's to touch on that concept. The fee ordinance is something that we restructured in 2015. We'll talk about it here in a little bit more detail, but it's something that it's appropriate to bring up again this year. New board, mostly new committee. It would be a good time to address some of that if we do see some of
You gonna drop them?
I'll tell you what, there's no denying that we don't make money. We don't cover our costs with building permit fees. We are subsidized, and we're grateful for that. So making processes and making sure, going back to that economic translation slide, the thing that I look at in there is that we've got $67 million of construction out there that I don't lose a wink of sleep over because I know it's done right. I know that our folks will sign off on it. I know that we're not going to come back and they're doing something that they shouldn't do in terms of whether it's land use or anything like that. So if you guys want us to operate, and just ask you a little bit more funding in terms of the subsidy.
What I always, if I could, I remember having a conversation with Dennis, and well, we're losing money, we're not profitable. It's like, you're not here, in my opinion, I don't think you're here to be profitable, because that $180 million in taxable residential real estate is the profit. It's not the permit, for the most part.
Yeah, and somewhere in one of our plans, though, it says that the departments should be cost effective and covering themselves. So we
do what we can.
Yeah, that's all you can do. Carl, did you have something?
Yeah, just a little clarification, going back to your IT problem, you had meant, or
Yeah, the permit system.
permits getting everybody married in.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that you may have to, employ a couple of people to data input and whatnot. That would be a temporary thing. Or how many people would you have to, employ if you weren't doing, IT work of, making it computerized?
So right now, it's not that we're asking for more employees. Right now, what we've kind of got is an all hands on deck to address some of the gaps that we have, because we don't have a workflow system that does some of this stuff for us. So where we would otherwise be able to take a permit offline and then review it without printing it, that's a step that the cost incurred to the applicant, but then also the printing. Printers don't always work that well.
Well, we've gotta, cut the trees, keep them in.
Yeah, keep the trees employed.
But that would be, you're looking to fix that problem when you get
Bingo.
all the
That's-
computerized stuff to work together.
Yeah, so our job descriptions are based on having digital review processes right now. So we could have a coup. we don't want it. We try to make sure everyone's happy in terms of what they have and they're supported. And that's what we can offer as long as we're working towards that permit system. Then things will settle in and we'll be able to really, our effectiveness has always been pretty good. Talking about not losing a wink of sleep over the amount of, if you will, liabilities that are out there. Our efficiencies have always been, that's been our focus. And this year we hit our goal. But what we did, we took extraordinary effort. And to request that of staff for the next 5 years, that'd be asking a lot. That would be. And that's the reality of where we're at. So that permit system is the way to make that effort ordinary 9-to-5 type effort and improve our effectiveness.
And that may be tied with John said is why people like you is they don't have to spend the time to drive out here to see you and.
It's a big piece. Yeah, that
may be the feather in your cap.
So, yeah, no, we appreciate it. It's, we know that people want to stay home sometimes.
So, Adam, what you're telling me, you 6.1 and 6.2 you put together here and you're done?
Yep,
Okay,
that
until
was
it gets to old
both department overviews and the annual report.
Pardon? Joe?
Until it gets to old business.
Oh, yeah, right, till you get to old business.
Yeah, right.
Well, thank you all. Thank you to the staff members that come in this morning. Appreciate it. And we will move on then to the routine. You got something else? Ed?
too, Adam.
There. I'm just looking for what window to press.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Adam and the staff. So we'll move on to number 7, routine consent agenda. Does anyone have anything that they would like to remove from the routine consent agenda? Mr. Kearns.
7.3.
7.3. Anyone else?
I'll move to approve 7.1 and 7.2.
Okay, Mr. Godmother makes a motion to approve 7.1 and 7.2 of the routine consent agenda. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Lou Ness. Any discussion regarding the routine consent agenda 7.1, 7.2? We'll go to vote. Jim?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Lou?
Yes.
Carolyn Campbell?
Yes.
Carl? I don't have to say Campbell.
No, you don't have
There's
to.
only one Carolyn here. Carl?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes, so we can move on to 7.3. Could I have a motion to?
Make a motion to approve 7.3.
Joe makes a motion to approve 7.3 and seconded by Carl. Discussion regarding 7.3, Mr. Kearns.
Couple questions on this. I know this has been a topic over, a question I've had several times over the years. So I'll start with the initial one that I don't see in here. What is I know it's past the date that we were supposed to sign this. What is the term of this? Did I read that wrong? Is this a 5-year term, a 10-year term?
It's a 10-year. It's a 10-year.
Because it doesn't state that in there, I
Well,
don't think.
It's,
Did
The way I
read-
read it was a one-year term and it's renewed for the next 9 consecutive years. And
Correct.
it just renews every year.
It automatically.
And it's a November start date, November like 20th.
Yeah, it's in paragraph H, Jim.
Okay, and then, okay, so then the other question I have is, that employee that they're going to use in the soil and water, it used to be Spring Duffy, is it still Spring Duffy?
So, Joanna can, if she's on there, Spring Duffy is still with Soil and Water Conservation. She has moved and changed and increased her role with the retirements of Ed Riscarna. I do believe they have another person that's come in with the same credentials as Spring and is coming up with her. But yeah, we would still have Spring Duffy with us.
That was my question, because she heads that department now,
Yeah.
that organization now. And I almost think that's a conflict there, that she would do work with us personally on her side. That she would do the work for the county when she heads that department, supposedly representing the people who they're bringing forth for violations and everything. And so I kind of have a conflict there myself, a personal conflict, that I don't think Spring Duffy should be involved with this one. But it would settle my mind, I could vote for this if they have a new person who is in charge of that, not the head of the whole organization.
Okay. I don't have an answer for you. Let me try to understand kind of the mixed board that Joanna's on. Maybe she can provide some
Yes,
insight.
can I?
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. My understanding or concern, Spring is the only wetland specialist you have for the Water Conservation District. She would be one. Ryan Beaver is the other one that does our inspection. And then we do have a third staff member they just hired for administrative purposes. But in general, Spring is the only one that they have as a soil, or a certified wetland specialist. McHenry-Lake is in the same office as Soil and Water Conservation District. They are two different and distinct offices with respect to federal government. McHenry-Lake does the subsidies, they do the 26, so your baseball stuff. Anything associated with farming is the NRCS office, and they do not share information with the Soil and Water Conservation District, nor us. The federal law through the whatever act it was, some farm act, says that you cannot, NRCS cannot provide information to us. We can't request information. It's FOIA, their office is non-existent with respect to that. So, Spring, although she's in the same office down the block, beside, behind Rosati, they don't share information. They cannot share information. So I don't know if that's kind of what you're getting at, Jim, with respect to violations. But what the NRCS does and what we do and what the Water Conservation District does are three distinct activities. And that's how it's been, that's how it will continue to be.
So she has no input on the NRCS at all?
No, she's not part of that. No, she's not an employee of NRCS. That's a totally different federal agency.
Okay. Thank you, Joanne.
Yeah, you're welcome. And we can talk about it further, or have Spring explain what her role is with respect to the NRCS or through the SWCE. But they're totally different. Although they share the same office, they're a totally different agency.
Okay, thank you. With that, I would move to table this until next month, and we request Spring to come in and explain how this works.
Okay.
I'm not comfortable with it. If we don't table it, I would vote no on this, so that's my only comment. I'll
Okay,
stop.
are you making a motion to table it till next month?
Yes.
Okay, is there a second to that?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Mr. Reinert. Any discussion regarding tabling this particular resolution until next month?
And what more do you think, I mean, if she's not part, just for
I'd
clarification.
like her to explain how it works in that office with her and her responsibilities. And who she does and everything else. And I think we just need some more time on this because basically it's a 10-year.
Well, it can be with 30-day notice, you can, I think it's a 30-day notice. I have to go back and look.
I just like some answers.
Okay,
Yeah,
sure.
it could be, Carolyn, 30
Yeah.
days without cause, but to Jim's
Just wanna-
point, typically when these things get passed, and if there's some reason it doesn't come back in front of us, it's probably not gonna get looked at.
So we we funded it through, because it came up the renewal was in November.
We haven't executed that contract yet.
All right.
Yeah, this would be the process that we would do.
Is it gonna just cripple us in any way? Is it gonna change anything in the next 30 days if we wait 30 days?
My estimations would be no. Joanna, if you've got any specific concerns that 30 days would disallow us to execute anything or provide services.
No, I want to do on status quo right now.
I'm sorry.
Working within status quo right now. The reality is that we've been working with soil and water conservation for 10 years. We've got a really good working relationship with them. Let's iron
It's
out
been
the
more than
details.
10 years.
Yeah, it's been more than 10 years. Yeah, right.
Yeah, and I don't have a problem with that relationship. I just want the answers of who we're working with and how we're working with them and how it affects the agriculture community. Because I know several times it's been brought up to me. And I want to have an answer for that prior to voting on it.
Okay, and he's coming from the reference of being chairman of the Stormwater Commission too, so I'm sure that's part of it, right?
That's part of it,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, okay. Any further discussion regarding tabling it?
It's just for 1 month, so
It's-
it's to the date
Yeah,
certain.
it's just to bring it forward next month.
To next month with a presentation, asking for a presentation from Spring Duffy.
Yep.
As long as we're working through the status quo, I personally don't see that there's any issue tabling it for a month myself, so. Any other committee members? Otherwise, we'll go to vote. All those in favor of tabling it to the next PED meeting, say aye.
Aye.
And I'll vote aye. Those opposed? And Vanessa votes no on that. But the ayes have it, so that's what it'll be tabled to the next PED meeting. Date certain, I just don't have that date in my head right now.
I think it's the first Tuesday, right?
It'll be the first Tuesday next month, yeah. February 7th. It's my birthday.
That came back quickly.
Yeah, well, I was like, God, I'm gonna have a meeting on my birthday. So, yeah, February 7th will be the date on that. Okay, we'll move on to old business. I discussed earlier that at 10 or 10:15, we'd take a break for 10 minutes. And I think there'll be some discussion on the next two subjects that'll take at least a half hour, 45 minutes. So, we adjourn the meeting for 10 minutes,
That would be great.
and I'll see you. Okay, we're all back. Dan, we're ready to go? Thank you. So we'll resume the meeting of the Planning, Environment, and Development Committee meeting of January 9th, and we're going to move on to number 8, old business, 8.1, discussion and direction, ancillary dwelling units, and Adam's going to lead the discussion.
All right, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
So we had, for the last couple of months of the last term, we had some comments and discussions on ancillary dwelling units. Currently, they are an allowed use by right with specific standards under the Unified Development Ordinance. So what an ancillary dwelling unit is essentially a second residence on the property. They have specific standards right now from the zoning standpoint, where they can't exceed a minimum square footage, a maximum number of bedrooms, which would be 2. They have all the other aspects from a building code standpoint that would meet a residence. Attached ancillary dwelling units have a little bit of a different standard because some of them may inherit characteristics of the residence. So if you put one on a first floor, we wouldn't want to restrict that to 900 square feet and add a partition somewhere that would be impractical and throw off existing building systems. So you're allowed to have it for the floor plate of that residence, as long as it doesn't exceed 2 bedrooms and has legal building code requirements, and they would have separate systems inherently, kitchen facilities, bathing, toiletries, etc. Come to September, October, November of this past year, there was a complaint that was filed, and it was as the memo states in Bull Run Estates, where there was a detached ancillary dwelling unit that was put up by right. And it did go through a variation process. This one did go through a variation.
I'm sorry.
This one went through the variation.
The
Bull Run.
No, it's
No,
not.
I'm conflating, I'm sorry.
You're thinking of Gilman.
Gilman, okay, that one's up. So, right, sorry. So we have this standard, and the request of that complaint was, we weren't, as a neighborhood, as a subdivision, notified that this was going in. And they wouldn't have been, because it was a by right petition, a by right request. So the request was, well, how do we get that? Where we were historically before the Unified Development Ordinance was was adopted, secondary dwelling units, or as long as they were attached, could be applied for and approved through the building permit process. You can add on to your house, you can modify your house. We don't really regulate how you set up your living room. We don't regulate all of these as long as your systems function and operate. So your well and septic system would have to support the number of bedrooms there. If we came across a plan that had a true blue second dwelling unit, meaning it was blocked off, separate entrances, could be keyed differently, you'd have 2 garages, some characteristics that kind of subjective, but obvious, then we would raise the flag. And if you had a second residence, then a conditional use would be required. So there was this allowed by right or conditional use approach. And that created scenarios where folks would get, and their architects and their builders would get pretty creative on how they would lay out their residences to eventually expand into that or have the ability to. And we recognized that we would have those conversations. In 2014, UDO changed that around, and they were not allowed until 2018. And that's where we came up with the current standards where we have today where they're allowed. So we have this request to consider, and that's what we're here today to discuss, is which direction would the board like to take? So the past several meetings, we've had this kind of general discussion. At the end of the last term, we said, hey, let's come up with a couple proposals. What would it look like? And that's what we're here today to present and then help facilitate this discussion to see if there is something between allowing it by right and requiring a conditional use in its entirety. So there's 3 scenarios on page 47 of your packet. And those regulations 1, 2, and 3. 1 would be to continue to allow the attached ancillary dwelling units by right without a regulatory change. The next one would number 2 would be to require a conditional use for the detached, the ones that would be standalone, second residence. And that would then, the attached ones would then have this by right ability with specific standards. And then the third one would really be to require a conditional use for all of them. One of the big pieces that we had issue-wise from the enforcement and the ability for staff to look at these and try to notify neighbors. We had no mechanism to notify neighbors if there was some veil that they weren't going to do, have an ancillary dwelling. If they didn't come out and weren't forthright with it, we would miss them. The other side of it is we wouldn't be notifying the neighbors directly, we'd be notifying the HOAs. And the HOAs aren't always together, just they go to fund. And specific covenants, we don't enforce covenants. So there's some of these items that just are not inside of our everyday realm and our authority to really enforce and oversee. Plus, we talked about staffing. That would drive a big staffing increase request to try to track these down and manage and verify that these communications were appropriate. So, go ahead, Jim.
Well, when you get a break, I want to talk a little bit about the legal structure for a minute. And your choices from a zoning ordinance perspective go hand in hand with the options you have. You can, when you use the term by right, and I know Mr. Vanderpool has said he doesn't think it should be as of right, but that's a shorthand for saying your zoning ordinance allows it. Okay, it's not an additional right. It's if you have this zoning category, you have certain rights in your zoning category. If you're a business, you can put a business up. If you're a state, you can do a single family home, you can do, but that's what we mean by right. It's shorthand for that term, that's allowed. Someone comes in and applies for a building permit. So that's one mechanism. The second mechanism, you could do a conditional use, and we did that for a number of years. If you wanted to have an additional, you went through the conditional use process, and we got to the point we're at today because we basically incorporated those standards that kept showing up in conditional uses as standards in the zoning ordinance, so that you could do either one. And by the way, the by right system used to work that you just put an addition on your house. And that addition, you know, when you're inside your house, you could use it as you felt like it, but it was a conditional use, or it was an addition to your home. Again, a neighbor wouldn't get information or wouldn't be told about an addition to your house. Because, again, you're looking at something that you're allowed to do. It's your property. You're allowed to do it. You get a building permit, you go do that. This board, as a county board, doesn't deal with building permits directly unless there is zoning change with them. That's why you have staff and building permits. The third choice, let's say you said, you know, you wanted to do none at all, you still have another choice, and that is someone could come in and ask for variation. And, you know, I was quoted earlier today as saying anybody can ask. Yes. U.S. Constitution says you have the privileges and immunities to petition for redress of your government. Your government did something you don't like them to do, you have the right to ask for variation in that and do that. And so no matter what we say about variations, you can always ask. And those are really your only choices that we have here. Mr. Vanderpool wanted to have notices for building permits. He and I discussed this at one point in time. It's like, you're just not going to be in the spot where you want to put a swimming pool up in your house, and now I got to give notices to my neighbors that I want to put a swimming pool up in my backyard or a shed or something else, and maybe they live in maybe the covenants in that neighborhood, you know, have been ignored or not followed, and it's 90 years later. I'm in a current fight right now in a lawsuit between two homeowners the homeowners asking to enforce the building line that was a private building line. It was incorporated in the subdivision in 1929. The first home that he's trying to enforce it against was built in 1930, and it's in the wrong side of the building line. So you're gonna tell somebody from a 1930 house they gotta take it down. I mean, you know, that's just, I don't think as a county, we wanna be in the middle of those. You know, they were private building lines, not public building lines. We have a zoning ordinance that has building lines. If we violate those, that's on us. But on private lines, we don't get into that. And I don't, you know, again, whichever way we choose on this, I'm not so concerned as to which way we go, as to make certain that you understand those are really the limits of what you have. There aren't any other choices.
I can't hear you.
Sorry, I
asked for the favor only once, to speak louder.
I will try to speak louder.
Last conversation.
Okay. But at any rate, when we get done from a county board's perspective, we have a choice. Make it by right, make it by conditional use, make it none and a variation. Those are your only weapons. I know you're dealing with blunt instruments when you're doing this surgery, but really when it's in, that's what we have.
And a big portion of the decision, in my opinion, for me, is if we do decide to do this or not do it, either way, how it falls on staff and their ability to enforce it and deal with the complaints about it. So if we do decide to do something, we need, and that's why staff brought this forward, because so we can get their input on these different ideas, on which one's more enforceable, which one's less problems for everybody involved. So the enforcement issue is always a part of the decision on this stuff. You got more, Adam? You want to?
I would add and kind of connect with some of the conversation we had during the presentation, which is that ease of application and the ease of complying with the regulations is a driver, and it does drive people to either try to veil what they're doing or to comply. And sometimes that's cost, sometimes it's regulation. But there's validity.
So in other words, the way it is now, the way it currently states is what's going forward, like the one before the board that was tabled back last month, on the one that they had to have a variation because it was over 900 feet.
Correct.
That's currently how we have it now, but by right, they could have that ancillary.
And that's
If it were under 900 feet, by right, they could do that.
Yep.
Permittable, not
Permittable.
conditional.
Correct. That
It's not
particular
conditional.
application, they're over about 200 square feet, and
That's a unique situation because that building is already there,
yeah.
and that's part of why I tabled it, to get everybody up to speed on what the ancillary dwelling units are, the size, the fact that this particular one, we'll talk about a little bit more of when we do the zoning stuff, but that building is already there. Our big issue right now is with subdivisions that have homeowners association that's not being enforced, and somebody's putting a second unit on that lot. And they're doing it by right as long as it's 900 square feet.
Or less than.
Or less than, yeah, 900 or less, right?
Well, and that was one of my questions about the covenants. We don't
enforce
We
private
don't
covenants.
acknowledge private,
Well, we acknowledge that they exist, but it's not, you know,
There's
there's
nothing
all
we can
kinds
do.
of covenants that are private covenants out there that we don't have anything to do with.
There's no way to do it across the
it's a
board.
slippery slope, let's put it
Because
that
there's
way.
some of those homeowner associations are active, some aren't, some have different, a variety of things that they enforce or they don't enforce. I'm gonna hold you up for a second, Jack.
That's
'cause
okay, it's
Lou-
all right.
Lou wanted to speak.
Well, I was asking the same question. If there's a covenant, whether it's active or not, and they agreed to it, isn't it on that group to enforce the covenant? And maybe homeowners then get together and decide whether, it seems like there's a middle spot for them to be here that doesn't involve us, but am I
think there
wrong?
is.
It leads to one neighbor suing the other neighbor to enforce the covenants is part of the issue though.
But is that still our work?
That is not.
No,
John, you want to go?
So, well, I know when I build a home in Crystal Lake, they require, and Lakewood too, a letter from the association that they approve it. They don't make it a part that they read the covenants for the subdivision. They get a letter from the subdivision that says we allow it or we don't. Maybe we could do something just that simple in the future. Like probably 80% of all the municipalities do.
Yeah, let Renee address this
I would
first.
agree that in municipalities, they do that often, but one zoning tool that municipalities use that's different is most new development is planned unit developments. And as part of that planned unit development, in the negotiation and the developer agreement, the municipality takes some responsibility for the covenants and restrictions that the homeowners association are in charge of.
Then I would go to like a Plan B and maybe suggest that on something that is a little touchy, that could be construed as something that's suable, right? Although we deem it permittable, and I totally back these buildings, and I think they should be permittable, but maybe we should have in the permit requirement for that is an affidavit saying that I understand that, you know, I could be sued if there are some covenants in my subdivision, so it's just brought to their attention.
And then that's something that.
I mean, you know, maybe just an easy fix for a big problem.
Yeah, right, I think that at this point, when we talked about that, it didn't satisfy the complaint at hand.
Right, not at hand,
Yeah, it would address
because
it.
we're looking in the rearview mirror.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
looking forward, right?
It would draw that line of, that's a middle ground where we're not involved, for sure.
Yeah, because I remember when these first came out, we're cheerleaders. You know, this is a great concept, you know, and now to slight them, I don't slight them. I support them.
So I have a question
Go
though.
ahead, Carol.
I'm sorry, it was to follow up on what you were saying. So like for the municipalities, are they actively going to the, I mean, you're saying some of them are planned unit developments, right? So they would already have on file that that's what the agreement is or whatever. And they're not necessarily looking for it, but they know to ask for it, right? They know to ask for that. So do they actively go to the
You know,
homeowners?
Carolyn, and in a city, the building department, they know every subdivision.
Right, okay.
Right? We don't know every subdivision.
Right.
We have so many-
You know, I agree.
It's a lot.
Right, it's a lot,
with
that's
that.
my feeling too.
I agree with it. So maybe
And it's
just
not a
an
subdivision
affidavit that
often.
they acknowledge,
But,
you know?
and I think it gets to the point where, because I think the request was not so much that we had to police it, but that they don't know that this unit is going up in advance. Then by the time that they can go and exercise their right to sue, that structure is already there, right? And so that's really gets to, the affidavit might be an.
Well, that's
Right, exactly, now it's your bad.
But let's keep in mind that we're in a county of various size parcels, some in subdivisions, some not.
Mhm.
I mean, I know one's gonna come forward, it's the 10-acre piece that's not subdivided particularly, and there wouldn't be anybody to go to. So that, and how do you enforce that, police it, whatever you wanna call it, across the board in a fair way? And that's been the issue with this, how to police it in a fair way.
Sounds like a building permit and a stormwater permit that we had years ago, you know, it's like, nobody told me I didn't need.
Yeah, right, well, it still happens, John. Lou, go ahead.
So we currently have zoning that guides this, what we do.
This use,
We
yeah, correct.
currently have something in place.
That allows.
And unless there's a compelling reason, compelling to adapt our current zoning, why would we do that?
I would say, Adam, I think he could speak to it too, is the ones that are in these longstanding subdivisions regularly create a complaint situation with the neighbors. and it's hard to enforce that. Is there a better way to say it? I'm not sure I'm saying it.
The one, I get what you're getting at, I imagine, is the subdivisions, those are the ones that we get the complaints from. The ones that are in the A agricultural properties, or the 10 acres that are kind of isolated and are not in the subdivision, those we don't get complaints from, because there's really no complaint.
Yes, there's more space.
Right, and there's nobody that would report to it, it's something they drive by. You take that same model and apply it to the actual permits themselves. The ones that we really have the discussions on are the detached ones, as opposed to the attached ones, because again, all you gotta do is put an addition on. And once the addition's on, no one's really gonna second guess it, it's there now. But once the detached structure is up, there's more curiosity, and then that comes out, and it's, so there's reality, and that's really where our model came from, that and detached focused on more. But to that same effect, the subdivision was always elusive. It was something that was very difficult for us to try to get a hold of in terms of enforceability and application of this ordinance. We can have the conversations of this is the requirement, and this is what it's going to cost. That's what we do every day. So if it's requiring a conditional use, and that's the direction the committee would like to go, we'll have those conversations with folks. But the other ones of trying to negotiate or discuss with the subdivisions and the HOAs, and it would pull us into a realm that we're just not equipped for.
Right. I agree with you on that.
Go ahead, Carolyn.
Part of the reason we went to this as a right is because most of them that came forward were being approved. So wasn't that part of it? Was that because putting them through the conditional use permit process was more costly, more time consuming for staff, and in the end you were more likely to agree to it anyway? Was that part of the
Certainly a factor, yeah. I mean, I don't have the numbers similar to what we talked about before. I don't have the numbers for how many variations of conditional uses that we had that were denied. We'll have them next year, we'll have them as soon as we can. But in terms of that, we had 30 that were in since 1957. Conditional uses specifically, and that was the Unified Development Ordinance, and why it was fashioned that way. One of the guiding concepts for when it was adopted was if we're always going to approve it, put it in there as a bylaw.
So keeping with the model that's more efficient, how do we then, what is that mechanism going to look like? Is it an affidavit? Is it just, making sure that somebody who comes in for that permitting process understands that they need to check? I mean, maybe just checking out that they understand that they have to go back and that, right, just kind of that aspect of it.
Just put it on them, but it's like, we warned you. You could get sued if you don't check.
Right, and as long as you're at least bringing that to their attention, I mean, does bringing that to their attention create any legal liability for us? Right, I mean, at what point can we insert ourselves or give that information out there without creating a liability for us, I guess would be my question, and Joe might know that.
I don't think we have a great deal of liability as long as we stay in one of those lanes. The other thing you could change, if you wanted to do a minor change, you can split this maybe. You don't have to say, R3, R2, R1, E1, E2. You could look at this as to what your zoning minimum lot size is too, and say, okay, maybe we won't allow this in an R1 district, but we'd allow it in an E1 district or something like that. That would be another mechanism to, because I do agree, if you're on a 40-acre farm parcel, nobody's showing up because you build another building on your property. You're just not.
Joe,
on the other hand, with what you have, I do think that asking a person as part of their permit, do you have a homeowners association, have you given them notice, and you understand that you have to comply, that's between you and your association, something along those lines.
and I have a question for you, just to add on to what you just said. So you would say like A1?
I'm not saying I'd say anything. I'd leave it as it is. But
I would too.
But if you're going to make a change, there are other ways you could divide this.
Well, because I might agree with you if it were permittable for A1 down to E1, and then you get to R1, R2, maybe conditional on that. But I'd hate to throw conditions on to too many of them and just make it hard for all of these applicants, because you might prevent that gypsy, there's that guy that's gonna do it without a permit.
You might do that, but then I'll take the other side of the argument, because in my opinion, the ancillary dwelling unit is great if you're thinking you're gonna have a relative, you know, a place for mom and dad to live, but 10 years down the road, what do we have other than a rental unit? And it concerns me, excuse me. So,
It's a toss-up.
Yeah, it's whether the committee and the board would want a permit versus a conditional or unit to want them in some zoning, I guess. I support them myself.
I like leaving it the way it is, but I do like the idea of what you and Joe,
Yeah, a letter of information. if you
a
want.
letter of saying, you know, you somewhere, something, of course, we're gonna run by the state's attorney when we do that before we do it.
well, and I lean on Renee for the answer to that, some of that, because we have homeowner associations that aren't active. So now how are we holding them up to do their building, getting their building permit? And
Well,
if they
that's
don't-
what I like about the affidavit. It's like,
We're not holding them up, we're just letting them know it's his liability, not ours.
Okay, so you're not asking the homeowners association to sign off on it, you're just asking them
We're
to,
just telling him, you could get sued if you don't.
the person sign off on it. Go ahead, Renee, please.
I just wanted to ask a quick question. So currently, one place that we have that is on our chicken keeping registration
Yeah.
and beekeeping. But we just have a statement that says, hey, be aware that if you're in a subdivision, you could have covenants that would not allow chicken keeping. Just kind of as a warning at the bottom. So is that what you're thinking, or are you thinking more of an affidavit that they have to sign?
If we did do something like that, Renee, I would make it that he would initial that to signify that he understands it. You know, because when Bull Run goes after them, you know, at least they have something to say, hey, look, you were warned and you still did it, you know?
Yeah, the signature would be a big part of it. It's the same problem with the permit thing where the guy thought he was getting his money back and it should have been non-refundable. We want acknowledgement. I would say that would be minimal.
It's some kind of an acknowledgement, even if you do it on one line, just
Yeah.
Carolyn, did you have something like that?
Well, I would even take it a step further from your notification. I would say, and could result in a lawsuit if you violate the terms of your, you know, the HOA or whatever it is. Just so that it's clear. It's not just that you should check. This could result in, you know, a violation of the contract and a
Then
potential
it is
lawsuit.
totally on them.
Yeah, right, and I would sign it. To your point though, Larry, when you talked about, you know, these units being more rental later on, I mean, these aren't, within the UDO or whatever, they're not allowed to be rental units, right? They're supposed to be, I mean, technically, we state in there, I don't remember, that they're not intended for rental?
They can be, yeah,
Oh, they can be?
There's
But they
standards that
have,
require.
the property has to be owner occupied.
Oh, the property does,
So
okay.
at
All
all
right, I get you.
times,
Okay.
you as the owner have to either live in the ancillary dwelling unit or in the principal structure.
So the reality is,
Yes.
in 10 years.
And I think that.
Lou, go ahead.
So it's sort of interesting that this piggybacks on the earlier conversation. How people are housed is changing. It's, you know, more and more of us are caretakers for elderly parents who live with us, or children and families who can't afford rental are doubling up in homes. And I think we're going to see more and more of that, not less and less. And so how we restrict that or manage that without making, you know, quite frankly, if my daughter and her kids and their husband needed a place to live and they came to me, I would say, okay. I mean, what am I going to do? Let them live in their
I
car?
support your right to do that too.
You bet.
Yeah, I mean,
And that's a big part of how this all came about, is affordable housing in McHenry County, just wasn't here.
Yeah, so I don't know, it sounds like we have something in place that we say go and,
Excuse me.
I don't know enough to actually know whether we should.
And the other, and I'll
Let's
still
bring
go
it back
back,
to staff.
still go back to my other argument is, at some point it turns into rental. The devaluation of your neighbor's property is involved. So it isn't just this cut and dried thing. And that's why we're having this discussion. And hopefully we can come up with the right idea to make it work, make more affordable housing, to your point. Make staff more comfortable in how they can handle these situations, and still provide an avenue for people to do this. Can you put a dollar amount on a conditional use permit? I don't know what that costs anymore.
Yeah, you know what, I switched
then I used
over.
to-
You put it on the,
Yeah, I'm trying to find the.
it's an attachment C.
It's on page 51.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
like
I don't have very many one.
the
No,
No,
average
you
is
were
30.
going, we're not doing the whole packet, we're going individual.
So you guys go by numbers that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
We
you
go
guys
by
go
the
full packet numbers.
The HTML, I do anyway, so I'm looking on page.
Okay.
Page 6 of 39.
Yeah,
Six?
Yeah, I'm on
Okay.
page 6 of 39 for
Okay.
that. But it's about what it was 5 or 10 years ago, $3,000. I tell everybody $3,000, $3,500 if I'm dealing with somebody that's looking for a conditional use permit. So that's the idea, plus the time and process of going through it.
That's the average.
And a variance, would there be a difference?
No, variance is going to cost us.
Variance can cost the same, according to Mr. Gadamoller, the variance attorney.
Same meaning, the 25 or $3,000?
Variances are 600
Yes.
on the UDO.
Yeah, I thought that was,
Yeah, well, it's
Yeah.
cheaper for that fee, but you're still going through the process. If you're hiring an attorney or somebody to do it with you, you're taking all the steps. It's just how many
Right.
people are in your hearing.
And then you have to go get a permit.
And then you have to go get a permit.
So you're doubling up if it's, right? It's costing a lot more,
Well, it's the $3,000.
What's
$3,000 more.
Yeah.
And if I could,
Yeah, go ahead, John.
and this is also, it reminds me of something from the 20s and 30s, that this, in the recession era, this is how grandma can keep her house too, as opposed to losing it, because she could let that apartment out and, for a little bit of extra income without having to lose the house. So, I mean, there are multiple goods to this. Just an opinion.
Okay. So we have a variety of opinions on this. We're hoping to come out of this discussion, and we got a new group here for the people that are new. We've had this discussion previously, not quite this in-depth, I guess, but we knew this is the type of discussion that we had to lead to today. And staff is looking for direction on what we can or cannot do with this. I think I've made my feelings clear. And I know for the new people, it's hard. We have, Lou would be on the side of affordable housing. John seems to be in favor of this type of stuff and not create a further roadblock or cost. Is that the correct way to say it?
And also too, when Adam did his presentation of ND zonings or changes or whatever, there were about 190 out of 190,000 properties or whatever. What do we have here since we approved them? 15, 14 out of 198,000. I mean, it's not like we're starting a big trend.
I'm not arguing that point,
Yeah.
but it's a interesting trend. How's that sound?
It's interesting, yeah.
I mean, I don't want to be, as chairman, influencing the committee completely, but let's get all the facts out there and different points of
Fair
view.
enough.
Different points of view, and see what we can do, well, to help the population and to help staff get through this. So Anyone else have an opinion? I think something that was agreed upon was the affidavit portion of it. Is that something staff can do? And
Yeah, we have a model for that currently with, as it relates to fire districts. So we have an affidavit where we can't hold up a permit through the state, Illinois Supreme Court gave us this ruling several years ago. We can't hold up a permit because a fire district in our area doesn't comply with their standards. So we have an affidavit that they will go coordinate, engage with the fire district. So we can model that language and give that to the state's attorney's office for review and incorporate that with the building permit application process as it relates to ancillary dwelling units.
okay. So that's something we could do without changing the ordinance, isn't it? Something that we could.
So, yeah, I mean, we could do that because it is a notice, and we would probably not, I made it too specific. We would probably pull it back and make it general, because the next natural progression, we indicate that here, is what's not to say that same application would do in pools or detached structures that are just garages that several neighborhoods and subdivisions don't allow either. So we would, it may turn into something that when we start talking with staff and the state's attorney, that it's, don't just put it for ancillary dwelling units. It may have to be applied more broad.
And so be it, it's not that hard once it's in place.
And it becomes part of the signature block for every application needs to be signed anyway, and we would put that in there.
Probably good practice.
Mike?
Yeah, go ahead, Carolyn.
So I was gonna say that answers the question, at least for now, but then we can still discuss, because I think you still have concerns about long-term issues related with this policy of ancillary, but.
I do. I can see the other point of view too. I mean, I see it as a way for affordable housing. My preference would be, that would be something for the municipalities to tackle, if as opposed to being in the county. I mean, the municipalities have, have their own rules, their own zoning. If they want to let the guy put an apartment above his garage, have at it. I don't know that it fits in the county. But,
So is there, so this is on a 3-acre parcel?
This particular one.
The 8618. That's, and there's no way that a win-win or a negotiation between the property owners can work?
no, it's more of a lose-lose for us. We're sort of stuck in the middle of it.
That's
Obviously, the owner wants to do it. His neighbors aren't too happy about it.
yeah.
So where do you go? And we don't enforce homeowner association things. So,
But I appreciate the intention of trying to make this work for as many people as we can. And how long has this been going on? This variance request, this
19.
conflict?
no.
So when they're allowed by right?
No, when it first became, when it was.
We became aware of this particular issue in September of this past year. The structure is up. It eludes me at the moment if there's a certificate of occupancy issued on it, but it's built. It is current.
Oh, it's already built.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it's been
This came
stewing
in
for
after.
a while.
Well, this one's in the mirror.
Yeah, right, yeah. There's nothing we're gonna do with the.
Would you require them to take it down?
At this point, they've complied with the ordinance, and that's kind of been our position, is that one, they've applied for something that is permittable.
Oh, okay.
The ordinance allows it, and they've built it within the
So
confines
it won't
of that
change
ordinance.
this project?
It will not.
Okay.
Well,
And
it
I-
won't change it from here. The association still has the right, or the neighbor still has the right to go take this on and
If they
say,
want to.
take it down. And that's a whole
Thank you.
different system, but that doesn't
Joe-
necessarily involve us.
So that was part of the issue, was that because the residents didn't know it was going on, they, by the time they figured out that what was happening, it was
Too late.
basically too late. And so that raised the question, what's the county's obligation to notifying neighbors is it enough, is the affidavit enough, so that at least, put the person on notice, the homeowner on notice, that they need to go back and check their home.
Right, but staff was pretty clear that to notify the neighbors or the non-operating homeowners association is just not something we can handle. We're not prepared to
It
do.
might create more of a legal liability outside of like just the affidavit.
So there's no way to stop this project? No.
Well, there is, I mean, the
But
current
not-
residents, but not for us.
Not for us.
That's gross. And there's a couple other ones that have permits already been approved, that they're gonna get to do it no matter what we do here moving forward. Those are
Okay.
done and they're in the past.
Got it.
So,
And it happens to other permit types. Pools and detached garages are some things that are sometimes identified in covenants that happen. And that has been our historic answer, is that
Okay.
it's not that we can hold a permit, we have a legal obligation to, once it complies, to issue that permit. And that's what we do. And if that's something that's against the covenants, then we do encourage them to go and talk to their homeowners association back then.
I don't know that we are gonna reach, I'm just hearing different opinions on this, reach an agreement where we can give staff any other direction than, I think we all agree with the affidavit part of it. Or most of us do, correct? And that's something that we should be able to do once you check with the state's attorney's office as a procedural situation, as opposed to us rewriting any kind of ordinance.
Yeah.
So that's a direction that I think you would move forward with for us.
Yep, absolutely. We will start that this afternoon.
That would be a great start on this. If anybody else has a stronger opinion or feels like we need to do anything else at this time, I do, but
Well,
but
continue it for a month to see what they report out, and if anybody has questions in between.
okay.
We can talk about this again in 4 weeks.
Put it on to discussion and direction for the next meeting, but we'll do the affidavit part minimally.
Sure.
We have some new members here that I know want to think about this a little harder, check into it, I'm sure. And we're going to talk about one of the zoning issues here in a minute that will put a little more light on this. We're not going to get in depth on it, but has everybody spoke their piece on where we're at on this one? Okay.
All right. Thank you. No, that does give us clear direction.
Okay. And check with the state's attorney if it has to be across the board. It may be, I guess, my direction would be, yeah, put it across the board, you know?
It would be easier, if you will, from the application standpoint, the enforcement standpoint, is to put it on all applications, kind of that high tide lifts all ships.
I have no problem with that, and rightfully so, that the association, the person taking this on should know that it could be a problem. Okay, and we'll move on to 8.2, discussion and direction with permits and penalty fee waivers. I instigated this a little bit with the help of another board member, in that we had a lot of people coming to us asking to waive the penalty fees after someone would complain about a project. Staff would go out, they didn't have a proper permit, so then there would be a penalty, they'd red flag them, they'd have to come in and get a permit, but there'd be a penalty fee to it. We didn't have a lot of direction to the staff on who should get a penalty and why they would get a penalty and which ones we would waive or not waive. So, did you have something in here, Adam? I didn't.
Yeah, I can walk you
there's a
through
staff report.
kind of the overarching, how fees are assigned, and then when and why they come here. So from the standpoint of, we have two models, we have two different fees. Permit fees are going to be anything for any development, so a new house to a pool to a deck, everything. That goes and is driven by the fee ordinance, the fee schedule that we've adopted. It was initially adopted in 2015, if I recall correctly, and revised in 2018. The revisions were to incorporate a new permit type. Solar accessory was one of them. And then we modified and kind of massaged some of them that we just saw that were maybe out of sync. The schedule itself is set up in a manner where it's flat fees, and the fees, the back end of that is all structured by time in, staff time in. So that goes from the time to take in a permit, a review, make sure it's complete enough to do the compliance review, and then to do those compliance reviews. And each one of those permit types on the fee schedule has a little bit of a different variation. So air conditioners, pretty quick and simple to do the review, and residential alterations are a little tricky. So when we look at then the fee, the timing of those fees and when they're due, initial submittals, and this is really what came up, it was in November. The initial submittal requires a 25% permit application fee, and that is non-refundable by the ordinance. But the request came in for a gentleman that did a commercial building, applied for it, for $4,000 permit, paid $1,000. We were able to issue that permit in about 2.5 weeks, whatever it may have been. He came in and said, listen, I'm not going to do it. So he canceled the permit, he requested a refund, and that's when our staff said, hey, you know, that $1,000 is that initial review fee, it's non-refundable. But it was only really buried in our application. It wasn't on our, I'm sorry, it was only put on our fee ordinance and not on our application. It wasn't really known that, hey, this isn't coming back to you. So we've made some of those adjustments to let people know. The other side of it is how we apply those fees. So if there is a second review fee, we do those reviews, as we kind of talked about before, with the intention of issuing the permits, not to look for what's wrong. So if it's issuable, but there's some deficiencies, we'll package some conditions on those and items to flag our inspectors when we're out in the field, or we'll get you rolling, but bring this in before this inspection. We're going to block any more inspections until you get this in. So get it rolling. To that effect, the rest of the permit fee would be due at that time of that first resubmittal or issuance. So the next time we see you in that commercial application, the other $3,000 would be due. Any other building permit, that other 75% or whatever the remainder of that fee would be due at that time. So we put together a fee criteria, a fee waiver criteria that kind of reflects our fee ordinance. Those are the first two submittals, 25% and 100%. If you have two more reviews, let's say you just can't quite get things right, after that third submittal, we're going to charge you 25% because we have confidence that we're producing good direction, that hey, you really should get this. And before we ever do that 25% add-on fee, call them in, sit down with Steve, sit down with whoever your consultant is or your builder or whoever's driving the ambiguity, sit down and let's talk about this, because after this, when you come back into this plot, we're going to charge you another $1,000 if it was that commercial application. We haven't had many of those. We've had a couple. We haven't had many. So when we look at that fee waiver calculator and that criteria, we inverted it. And so at that initial resubmittal, if they've applied, they would be eligible for 75% if they came in. That's what we put forward. 50% if they're at the first submittal, 25% at the second. And then if they've gone through 3 resubmittals and now they're asking for a cancellation, we've done a lot of work in terms of staff time. And that's really the only thing we could throw at this criteria from the permit fees that made any sense. That was objective and not subjective. So that there's a little bit of meat there for the committee to consider when there's a permit fee waiver request there. On the violation side, this is one that we'll see a little bit more of. Be it stormwater, be it planning, and the zoning petitions, or building permits. The penalty fees are applied just like they would be for if you're doing a pool. If you did a pool without a permit, then it's a double fee. So it's just the penalty fee is 2 times whatever that base fee is. The schedule in which they're obligated to pay it would be the same. 25% up front, 100% by the first review. When you have a violation, every violation is different. But for the majority of them, when we get a complaint, we are a complaint-driven office. When we get a complaint, we respond to it. We try to respond to those within 24 hours, on-site within 48 hours. Once it's validated, once it's verified, then we send that letter, usually within 72 hours. That's in hand in a week and a half. That letter asks the homeowner, the property owner, whoever is on that mailing list, to respond to us within 2 weeks, 14 days. We put that in for follow-up that month or the following month, whatever, 2 weeks out. And if we don't get any response, then we send a second letter. And that request response from the property owner to come into compliance or to work to a plan within 10 days. So we've turned up the heat a little bit. If they blow us off, then our only other letter or only other option then is to send a notice to appear. And we send them to court. Once we issue that, so that's 10 days and 14 days, rounded up, usually it's going to be a month. It's going to be 4 weeks in total by the time we're at that point where we're going to say it's time to go to court. We issue that notice to appear, it's 30 days or more out, so they have another month to comply. They come in and comply, tear up the file, it's done, great, we're done, we're in compliance. We don't really tear it up, file it, it's done, it's closed. If they don't, then it goes forward. At the point where they finally applied for these permits, typically the notice to appear is the compelling one. We'll get some folks that will answer the first letters, second letters, but we really get a lot of action out of the notices to appear. They're certified mailings. All right, what is this? I have to sign for it. They come in, they call us. I have to be in before a judge next month. What's going on? And that's where our negotiations start. And once they negotiate, really before that court date, they can resolve it. But once they start negotiating, the enforcement action is stayed. Now, if they're in court, they're in court. That just kind of goes along with whatever that enforcement action is. When they respond before, we'll follow whatever that schedule is. If they need to go get an architect, or if they need some time to tear something out because the ground's frozen or because it's not frozen, whatever it might be, then we give them that time and we just kick it out to whatever that agreement was. It takes time. So the model, I tried to kind of apply that same model in terms of what are the phases of resubmittals. And I see I didn't even update the initials resubmittal. In this chart, it would be initial letter, second letter, notice to appear, and carrying that forward to if they're entitled to that fee. And that would be that 75%. 50% to 25% to set it up in stages. That was the only objective stages of a violation that we could really assert.
But we're not, I don't think we're here to look for a hardcore, this is it. We're just looking for, this would be the typical situation, this is the model, this is the guidelines, if you will.
Right, and so I guess framing that all out, it's staff time. And that's really the only thing that if there was a trigger for a fee waiver was staff time, it was staff involved. Outside of that, there's not much in the way of objective criteria to evaluate. We've pulled around to all of our associates throughout the state, zoning, some of the zoning administrators and the building code officials throughout the suburbs. They certainly have fee waivers for house fires, tornadoes, ag properties, all that, some of the similar stuff that we have. But in terms of this, it was staff time was the only comment.
So we had a regular run of people requesting a fee waiver or penalty fee waiver. And we didn't have any model, any criteria, other than I'd sit here and ask Adam how much time did staff put in on this? And at what stage are we with notifying the guy and trying to come up with something that was a fair way to adjudicate it, essentially. That's a big word for me. So that's where this came about and why Adam put this together for us. I look at this and say, this gives me something to base my decision on, something I can reference. I don't know if there's any legalities to it. Did you run any of this past the state's attorney yet?
None of it.
Okay.
No, it's all outside of the ordinance.
Okay. Yeah, it's outside. To me, it's a guideline, a model that I can refer to or speak to in front of the committee or you can say, hey, you know, we put this much time on this is where we ought to be with it, and guide us a little bit sometimes, so we got something to rely on. Anyone else have, good, Bill?
Yeah, I would say run it by the state's attorney's office, and, you know, I don't know that it needs to be a modification of the ordinance. I think it's literally an internal thing, but at least tell people, look, you know, we've been at this for 4 years. We're not going to give you the feedback when it gets to this board, and we have something to stand on to say, forget it.
Sure.
You know, on the other hand, if it's, you know, the new homeowner who just moved in and they got their 14-day notice, you know, maybe we could argue about the 25% at that level, but, you know, I'd like to have something else besides this is what I feel like today.
Right, and that's what we're looking for, is this guideline, and whether we bring it up, Adam, or you bring it up, when you bring that fee waiver request to us, if you say, okay, this is, you can have that put together already, this is what we've got into it, this is where he's at in the notices, this is whether he complied. I know we asked that, but there's still that, you know, how are we feeling about how this is going kind of thing that we can't put a number on is easy. Go ahead, Carolyn, you want to add something?
Yeah, I was just going to add, I kind of get into what Joe's talking about. I understand it being a guideline. I'd rather it be like, this is the path we're going to follow. And then if there's really a situation where, you know, like maybe it's somebody new or they, you know, whatever. I can't even come up with something at the moment where we could say, okay, you know, this is the first time, whatever. We won't give you the 25%. Whatever, we'll do the 75% or something. But by and large, I'd rather have something that's pretty much set, so that we take out that subjectivity to it. And we are talking about staff time. We really are. And the number of people who come in, and then the argument at the end is, well, we want a fee waiver because now it's a burden. The fee is a burden to the person. It's like, well, of course it's a burden. You didn't follow the rules in the first place. That's why it's designed to be a burden, to entice people to actually follow the rules. So I like it. It's more not just a guideline, but this is what we're going to do, unless there are, again, we always have that option to.
We do have that option, and if we're going to vary from this guideline, then whoever wants to vary from it should be able to make that argument for whatever cause or reason, one way or the other.
Yeah, exactly.
I think this looks pretty good, these numbers myself. I don't know what, anybody else? Bill or John?
I have no opinion on it. I go in for a permit, I'm going to get a permit. I understand it happens though.
Well, even at that, it does happen, and the penalty fee waivers, and as Carolyn said, then they want to, well, we got to pay for our permit now, like I was supposed to do in the start, so why should I be paying a penalty on top of it? The question I would have in the first, maybe I just didn't read this close enough. The initial submittal, are they required to pay 25%? Are they paying the whole permit and they would keep we would keep the 25%? Or the refund entitlement 75% of the 25% that we got?
No, that would be of the entire permit fee.
Okay.
These percentages are based on the entire permit fee.
That they would pay the entire permit fee up front.
They would.
That'd be a little bit different than the commercial one that we had to deal with then.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So under that model, 25% was what was paid, and so it would be there wouldn't be any of that 75% of the permit fee that was already paid that we would owe back to them. So they would be, just wouldn't have anything to refund them at that.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Can I clarify that
Yeah,
again?
go ahead.
So, going back to this initial submittal, it's 25% of the total fee. But if they stop it at that time, you're giving them 75% of the 25%?
No, so yeah, let me back that up. So when someone comes in, they're required, let's say the permit fee is $1,000. They're required to pay an initial submittal fee, which would be 25% of that $1,000, or they can pay more. So under this model, let's assume they paid the entire $1,000, and then they called us back the next day and said, hey, we're going to cancel that. Then they would be entitled to 75%, $750 back if they paid that whole $1,000. If they only paid $250, then we would tell them that there's nothing to refund, but we'll cancel that
And I don't think the next day would be the right way to say it.
Yeah, right, that's, yeah, how's it?
2 weeks later, after
2 weeks
staff
later,
reviewed
another
this
time,
thing,
yeah.
and it's time for them to move forward. I mean, if it was actually just one day and staff didn't have time on it, we would
Yeah.
probably agree to refund it all, right?
Right, there's some administrative ones that never make it to the committee, so there's, talk about our permit software, there's some tracking things, there's online permits that, some of the PDFs that get mixed up, and I submitted that, and it turns out they did, and we don't give them, we don't go with penalty fees, whatever that may be, or the previous homeowner did the work, then the new homeowner wouldn't be subject to any of those penalty fees either. So there's some administrative ones just like that, where the ink's not dry in the check, we'll give you the check back.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think, I like it for a guideline myself, and I think the numbers are they fit. So I don't know that, we have suggestion to take it to the state's attorney's office, make sure.
We'll confirm, yeah, I mean, that was really the big piece, and I tried to pepper that in here, that this isn't part of the ordinance. That we, when we apply, right now we write these memos to kind of give you a history of what happened and color it. We'll take this and verify that we can apply this model to those memos.
Okay, Bill, go
I
ahead.
was gonna say, the state's attorney's office may make us modify the ordinance.
They-
That may be where
Mhm.
it comes from.
Okay.
Because they may say, fix the ordinance and this will be your, and the upside of fixing the ordinance that way, yes, they can still ask for something different, but you're gonna cut down the number of requests pretty quickly.
So in your opinion, it would be better if the ordinance was changed?
I think they're gonna make us.
Okay.
I mean, it wouldn't be the first time I was wrong, that's for sure, but I just think if you're gonna implement a guideline and it's gonna cost people money, that at the front thing, they ought to have something besides just they ought to be able to look up the ordinance themselves and figure out why they're paying this or not paying this.
This is more of a guideline than we've had in the past.
It's much more, but in the past, everybody could ask.
Okay.
And what you're doing is you're kind of saying, instead of asking us for this, this is what we're following.
Okay.
And once you do that, I think you probably ought to be incorporated someplace so that the general public sees it, not just the one person. That's on, I say, if they
That's a
don't,
good point.
if they don't think so, and we can do it just implemented, I'm okay with that too. I envision that we're gonna hear something about make it formal.
Mhm. To that point, it would ease it. Right now, the conversation that we have with folks when they, how do I get that waived, is, well, you can request a waiver from the county board. How's that work? Put it in writing, and that's a difficult thing to get. Some of our folks end up really helping, sitting down with people to, you have to write this down, you have to write your request down. So having a structure for it would help our staff tremendously too.
Well, I like the guidelines and having some structure like we have here, but I also like the ability to take, there's so many variables in these things. How do you put it in the ordinance and be that specific to cover all these different situations? I personally, if that's what the state's attorney says, then yeah, that's what we have to do, of course. But I like the idea of being a guideline and gives us some leniency for those special situations. Because every one of these is so different when it gets to our table.
Sure.
So that's where I'm coming from. I'm not, not having it in the ordinance.
I'm with you, Larry. And I hate to tell him how to run his office, but.
No, that's what we're here
If
for.
we have to.
We're here to tell him.
No, but I mean, at a certain point, we're setting policy, not micromanaging,
Right.
And I'd love to give Adam the leeway. But, too, Joe, if it requires a state's attorney saying we need to change the ordinance, well, then that's what we gotta do.
That's easy enough to check in.
Yeah.
Right. And other than that, I like the guidelines that are here, the numbers are here, the percentages that work. Obviously, staff's given this some thought for how much time and our dollars we put in it. Is there anything else that we need to do with this? Or anything else staff wants us to do with it?
I feel like Mr. Kearns has something to say.
You're too tall for me to wrestle with.
Probably twice as fast.
Twice as young.
Well, if there's no further discussion and staff is comfortable with our direction, we'll move on.
Sounds great.
Okay. We'll move on to 9.1. Zoning and hearing officer reports, Renee.
Okay. So I handed out a revised sheet for you.
Yes, thank you,
Yes,
thank you
thank
very
you.
much, and to John's note on this, I know it's been a couple of years since you've been here. Renee gives us just a little synopsis of what's going on, and then if there's not a big problem with one of these things, we're not gonna spend any
No
time
problem. No
on it. Because it's when, you read if it goes to ZBA, everything's there, so.
So that said, this time, there's only one that is pretty easy. So the first one, Gussie, that is a proposal for conditional use for a residential care facility. So it's in an established neighborhood in Algonquin Township. It's a home that the applicants purchased this year. They both are in the healthcare field. The son is a nurse, the mom is a caregiver, and they're proposing to do an in-home residential care facility. So the exterior of the building shouldn't change. It should look like a single-family home, but it would accommodate 4 or 5 residents in the home. It's more independent living. They could have cars. It's something that's happening. It's a trend, and it has happened here. There's been a couple of conditional uses for it, but they've been properties that have been more isolated. This is the first one that I know of that we've had that is actually in a neighborhood. And the neighborhood association was represented, and many of them were opposed to it. The planner for Algonquin came out to the hearing and stated some opposition that they informally have, but we haven't gotten any kind of objection from the city, any kind of formal objection.
Do they understand that we need a formal objection to change to a majority vote, or
I
supermajority?
don't think
This
with
is a
conditional use it
you don't
even
have that option.
changes
Don't have it?
anything.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and the neighbors haven't filed any kind of formal objections either. They were just heard at the hearing. So that's what Gussie is, and you might get some calls or emails from some of those neighbors.
Can we
Go ahead,
discuss this a
Carol.
little bit? So everybody should have gotten a letter from, I'm thinking, from Jill Lewis regarding her opposition to this. And there was quite a bit of opposition at the hearing, right? And so my question is, and this kind of gets to rental versus rental units in a residential area where people are not anticipating rental units. And I wasn't sure if the homeowners association actually specifically prohibited rental units in that neighborhood.
I don't know, but
Because they
they
had
are
really
represented by council.
They were, but I was curious, they were represented by council, but it was almost like that never got answered. Like they kind of said there shouldn't be any rental units, but then they didn't really.
I don't know, I haven't pulled any covenants for that subdivision, so I don't know.
It's usually not rental units, it's usually multifamily. And the trouble that we have with multifamily is the Federal Fair Housing Act, which really restricts our ability to do much of anything with group housing.
Okay.
Because that's why when you see the alcohol rehab centers that are in group housing, or the Home and Sparrow that use group housing, there's a whole cast of federal law that says we don't have the right to stop 5 people from living together.
Yeah, because you do have that in other neighborhoods, right? I mean, I know one.
I mean, I don't know what, and I've gotten the calls here too on this, but that is one of the differences that we have to be careful about from our end, is we don't have the right to say you can't have a group home.
Right. And it is residential use. I mean, some of the comments were a little.
It's a group home for seniors.
Right, but it really didn't actually, I mean, you could have actually a large family in a house like that where, you know.
That was brought up a few times, if you had a home with 4 teenagers.
Right, and all those cars and.
Right, a similar impact.
So
So,
many times we had 4 cars on it.
But, I mean, there are some regulations about square footage, number of bedrooms, et cetera, that fall into place on this too, as far as what you're limiting. My presumption is that this is a large house, but they're not adding kitchens or apartments or
They are not.
nothing like that. Jim, did you have something?
Yeah, does something like this residential care facility for seniors, does it have any regulations on licensing or something?
I don't know.
They have to prove
There
it.
are licenses.
So
They
they're
would
licensed?
be required to get state licensing.
Okay.
And that's kind of why this mother and son team are interested in taking this on, because he is a registered nurse and she has worked for many years as a caregiver. So during the hearing, there were a lot of questions about what kind of licensing they're required and that sort of thing. They seem to understand what's entailed.
Do we go back and say we need sprinklers or anything like that, or?
That comes at the building permit phase.
It's unlikely that the magnitude of this would drive that, trigger those. There's residential care facilities, and then I want to say it's 35 off the top of my head that would of patients. I believe it's 35 that would trigger an institutional level building code review.
Okay, Carolyn, you had something?
oh no, I was just gonna add that it's an unskilled facility. It's really not designed for skilled nursing care. It's more of a caregiver, so people live independently with the assistance of somebody on site 24/7.
Joe, did you have one?
I was gonna say, you caught me on the 35 people, but, because like, for instance, under the state statute, if you bed and breakfast, if it has 5 guests, it has to be sprinklered. So my guess is that's one of the reasons maybe they have 4 here.
Right, so that 5 is triggered, there's an exception in there if you have an owner occupied and you rent out like 5 rooms, so it's not all occupancy, it's based on those rooms, and then it would go into those requirements for like hotels and motels, but this is a weird spot because it's almost more of a group home, and then it gets, we've tested the waters a few times with sober living facilities that when they've been challenged from fire districts really and say, hey, this needs to be a sprinkled facility, and there's really nothing contextual changing about the property aside from the occupants and what they're talking about.
Must not be Huntley Fire Department.
I don't know if anybody, where this is being put, if anybody's in that, if it's in any particular person's district, but this one or any other one, I always encourage, if it's in your district, to research it. You can bring us any other information that would be pertinent to making a decision. It's not in my district, I know that, but
It's District
I
1.
don't know, I'm not real familiar with how Algonquin is.
Well,
It's
Algonquin's on several districts, I didn't look up the actual.
It's not
street
mine,
address.
so it's not 3. I don't think you have
I have
Algonquin.
Lake in the Hills North.
Okay, so
This is District 1.
yeah, if you're in that district, or if you know someone that is in that district and have the time to ask them to research it, see what any other pertinent information that we could use to help make a decision.
And I'd be careful too with discrimination. I mean, there's housing laws.
Well, you know,
I'm sorry, what?
I'd be careful with discrimination, there's housing laws.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, you know, I'd let this one go to the zoning board of appeals with a 6-1 approval myself, but.
Well, I'm sure, and if we read through what their documentation is and the minutes of that meeting, it might clear up a lot of our questions.
Right.
So, okay.
Okay.
We have
So the
homes
next-
in a house because of that.
The next one is Rodarte, that's in Grafton Township, and that's a A1 to A1C. It's a conditional use for a banquet facility. This one is one of, we have a list of properties that do banquet facilities and parties and weddings and things like that we get calls on. This is one of them, that's how it came to our attention. We had them come in and get the conditional use permit. It's a very nice historic home, big barn on the property. They have some plans for improvements that you'll see in the packet. and a site plan that this would be tied to.
Is this the Lincoln group? Do they call themselves the Lincoln group?
No, this is the Rodarte.
They have
Rodarte.
Marinka Road, is
Infinite,
that the one?
yeah,
Okay.
The old railroad, underground railroad house there, that's the one
Mhm.
you're talking about.
Yep. First or second house on the right.
So at the hearing, there were two
Had a lot of
neighbors
parties there.
in attendance. One was supportive and one was very much not supportive. But when you look at the conditions, there was at least one condition that the zoning board kind of came up with on the fly to help the neighbor that was having trouble with it, and that was to put up an 8-foot fence between the Rodartes and the neighbor. The neighbor seemed satisfied. I don't know if you'll hear from her or not. She was very vocal at the hearing, but Chairman Stone worked hard to try to find something that would appease her. So
Is this a municipality?
That's,
this is,
no,
County's doing it.
it's county.
Okay,
It's west of the municipality by about 1.5 miles.
okay,
It's right on the edge.
okay. Thank you.
Okay. And then the next one is your guys' petition for the text amendment to clean up the subdivision ordinance. So the only thing, when that went through hearing, the only thing that was changed was there was a slash between drainage districts and watershed groups, and we changed that slash to an and. That's the only thing that changed since you guys saw it before.
Deal's off now.
Okay,
And then the last one is Gilman, and that's the variation for the ancillary dwelling unit that was tabled till this month. And the only thing that I will add on that one is, as we discussed here, you can have an ancillary dwelling unit on that property in that building as long as it doesn't exceed 900 square feet. So this applicant, the building is 1,100 square feet. So he was insistent that he needed to get a variation so he can use the entire building. In the meantime, though, after discussing with his attorney, he did submit a building permit, which we have approved, where he took 200 square feet of that building and just devoted it to his storage. So he reduced what is the ancillary dwelling unit to the 900 square foot limit. But he's still asking for the variation because he still wants to use that space as part of the ancillary dwelling unit.
so, and I'm the one that asked to table it last time because these ancillary dwelling units were issues, and we have new people on the board and in this committee too. It's already up. I suspect it was a 3-car garage or something to that effect on the property. I didn't have a particular problem with it, as long as we all understand what we're doing. And as Renee said, he has a permit. So this is going to be an ancillary unit no matter what, whether it's 900 feet or 1,100 feet. Since the building is already up, I don't have a problem with going along with the idea of the variance. So I just wanted to make sure that you knew that I wasn't objecting to it because of that or tabled it because there was anything that I was feeling was wrong, other than that we get it out in the open what it is and what we're doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just had one question. I know you wanted
Yeah,
to-
go ahead, Jim.
So, clarify this with me, I don't understand. So if we failed it on the board for the variance, he's still okay because he's gonna be 900 feet?
So it's going one way or the other.
Yeah, it's either way.
The only question is, does he have a 200-foot storage unit?
Or can he leave it?
Or can he use the 10 by 20 foot space for something else?
Right.
So the door goes in after we issue them.
I was gonna say that's,
And that's why we're not seeing the vote outcome?
no, it's a variation request. It just went to hearing officer. It's just one person.
The hearing
Well, for clearing
officer
it up.
recommended approval.
Okay.
But this no longer requires a supermajority though, right, on the floor?
Correct.
This one never did.
Oh,
That was a
this-
different
one.
That was a different.
That was a different,
okay.
that was, yeah.
I would
Very
just,
good.
Go ahead, Carolyn.
I would just say, because it's an existing building and it's not changing the footprint, I agree with whoever was listening to it. I'm fine with it being, the larger ancillary dwelling and not necessarily worry about the storage. I mean, at this point, you're not changing anything anyway. And so that seems reasonable to me. If he's fine with keeping the storage area, then that's fine too.
Okay. Well, and just, like I said, I wanted to do a little more discussion on it just because of the whole deal with the ancillary units that maybe people weren't familiar. Thank you. Anybody else have anything? Renee, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Renee.
Okay, I think I'll turn to that page here. What am I gonna look for?
Future topics, executive session, and adjournment.
Wasn't worth printing the page out for, was it? Okay, future topics, anyone want to bring anything up? We don't need an executive session. Go ahead, Carolyn.
Only thing I want to talk about is, and I've mentioned it just kind of in passing before, is, and I know staff is aware of it, of certain unincorporated properties that are right up against incorporated places, unincorporated butting up against incorporated, and our standards being less than what they would like for them on there. And I'm talking on Huntley Road, right, in Lakewood.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so just, just future discussion about how do we handle as incorporated areas creep out, kind of addressing that what they're trying to have for their communities are different standards than what we have, and how do we address those as we go forward?
Okay, I don't have a good answer for you on that.
Right, no, and I don't either, because anything we do is not going to, so it's a property that they're allowed to have a lot of, vehicles on there, there's just not the same standards.
I
And
know
it's
what you're talking about.
right, and it's right next door to an entrance to a development there. And even if we do something, it's not gonna change what happens on that property. I would imagine that would be grandfathered anyway.
Yeah.
Somehow,
Yeah.
so I don't.
Maybe staff could come up with something on that if whatever is the big issue on these things that,
I was really proud of those 2 items that we brought forward today to have some structure. This one is a doozy.
I know, but I thought, but that's my district, so I was kind of.
Put some fresh eyes on it.
Yes, that would be
Yeah,
great.
I hear you. It is a difficult.
so they have, other than they have a lot of stuff there and they're actually in compliance with their zoning?
With our zoning, right.
Yeah.
In our zoning, right.
Yeah, right, they are.
Yeah, okay.
And they're well aware of what the guidelines are and
So
when they would be out.
So if there was anything we could do is if they weren't in compliance, we could say you gotta get in compliance, and then the municipality could file a formal complaint, and it would affect our vote.
How many acres do they have in that spot, do you know?
Well, it's actually, but it's not
10.
just one, it's not just one.
Is it 10 or more?
It's 10 acres what they
On
have
that
right
one.
now.
Okay.
And they have,
It's probably
They have
10
animals.
acres in a square foot.
they're right.
Because if it's
Or
under 10
something.
acres, Lakewood, and they're surrounded, Lakewood could force them in.
Really?
That's what I always fell back on, and I always wondered, why aren't we just pushing it on the Lakewood?
Well,
Partly because I think the expense of having to deal with getting them into compliance.
well,
I don't know.
but Lakewood has been screaming about it, and you say, if you're surrounded and you are 10 acres or less, all the town has to do to annex that into the town is put it in the newspaper, wait their time, and annex it. There's
And
no
then they would have to- then
annexation
the property
hearing,
would-
there's no zoning, you become whatever their minimal zoning is, and then they send you a notice. I had a client one time that got the notice because Cary came and gave him a ticket because his dog wasn't licensed in Cary. Now, they annexed it the night before. He didn't know he needed to have a dog license by 8 a.m.
But it would have to be on all sides?
He's got to be surrounded by municipalities, not the same municipality.
No, but if you're next, but it's a strip of unincorporated properties, so they're not
And
technically.
he's not in court, and he's not going in that way either. Then you gotta get the neighbors to force it.
I got you.
There's a bunch of ways to do it, but it's never easy.
Okay.
And it's also something, again, the municipality drives that, not us. I mean, we can drive compliance with our ordinances, but they have to drive the size of their town.
It might be part of the conversation you have with those people, though, that there's other avenues. Possibly. Okay, anything else? Any motion to adjourn? Moved by Mr. Kern, seconded by Carl. Any discussion regarding